Renly Baratheon's breath smelled faintly of mint and fear. The candlelight in Ned Stark's solar flexed and guttered as a gust slid through the arrow slit, worrying the banners on the walls. Renly's green velvet caught a blade of fire and flashed, his shadow raking across the floorboards. "Now," Renly said, his voice low, "tonight, we have 100 swords, quiet men who answer to me. We go to Maegor's, take the boy and his mother into custody. Present them to the king at first light with your proof. Joffrey will be a wrench chick without claw or beak, Cersei a lioness declawed. Once they're in irons, the city will bend to you as protector. Stannis will come to claim what is his by law. Will live with his temper later. But if you wait, if you do as you always do, the spider and the whisperers will talk, the gold cloaks will be bought, and when Robert dies..." The name struck Ned like a hammer. Robert. He saw his friend as he had been on the road to the Vale, laughing, broad as the sunrise, and then as he had been this morning, bloated and gray, stinking of wine and boar and the rot that had laid hold of him. He tasted iron. The candle guttered again, and for a heartbeat darkness swallowed Renly's face. "Honor," Ned said, not sure if he was speaking to Renly or to the old gods that had watched him grow in Winterfell's godswood. "Honor is a stubborn thing." "It is," Renly agreed, "and it will be our death if we honor the lion's patience. You have proof of the bastardry. Use it." Ned's eyes went to the desk where his sealed letter lay, the one that named Stannis heir, written while Robert drifted in and out of pain, muttering of hunting and of Lyanna and of a crown that sat heavy as a stone. Beside it lay his father's old dagger, a plain thing of good steel. He looked from blade to wax and back. He thought of his daughters. He thought of a boy with golden hair and a woman who smiled like a cat and had claws to match, and of the Riverlands burning while Tywin Lannister tested the realm's will. Even now, he told himself, there is a way to do this cleanly, a way of letters and seals and the sanctity of the king's last words. But letters could be burned and seals pried up with a knife. Sanctity meant little to men who measured justice in gold and blood. If Robert died in the night and the queen moved at dawn, he rose. His knee ached from old hurts and the beating Jaime Lannister's cell's words had given him in the street. Renly watched him stand, and some tightness in the young man's jaw eased. Renly had a pretty face when it relaxed. He could pass for a lighter Robert in the half-light, if one squinted and ignored the softness. "I will not be the man who takes a king's child from his bed to kill him," Ned said. "Such ugliness begets ugliness. We will take them into custody. For law, not for vengeance." "For law," Renly said quickly. "We bind them and bring them to Robert alive. You have my word. And 100 swords. Bring them," Ned said. "Quiet men, loyal to you, not bought by Lannister coin. We move as if the walls have ears." "They do?" Renly said, and gave him a sudden, almost boyish grin. "That's why we move now." He slipped away like a cat in silk and whispering leather. Ned stood for a moment after the door shut and the candle's flame recovered from the disturbance. He listened to the palace, distant laughter from the kitchens, the clang of a distant bell, the sighing of the night wind. In the godswood at Winterfell, the wind had always been a friend. Here, in this red city that smelled of piss and spice and hot iron, it paid no heed. Ned belted on his sword. He slid the plain dagger into his boot. He blew out the candle and let the darkness come. Felt cleaner than the light. In the corridor outside, Jory Castle's absence ghosted his steps. Ned moved without haste through torchlit halls, his limp slight. The Tower of the Hand emptied into a long passage that fed the belly of Maegor's holdfast. He drank the details the way a man parched drinks water, how many guards at each door, whose surcoats they wore, which torches sputtered, where a tapestry's shadows gathered thickest. At the outer yard, Renly waited with Loras Tyrell and a knot of men wearing plain leathers over good mail. Not a Tyrell rose among them. Renly was keeping the flowers' colors hidden, wise boy. Loras had a boy's face and a swordsman's calm. His hair was a dark gold that would have pleased Cersei, only it was real. He nodded to Ned with grace. "Lord Stark." "Ser Loras." "Best we break no oaths tonight." Loras said softly. Else the gods grow wroth. We break no oaths, Ned said. We bind treason. Renly was already speaking to the sergeant at the drawbridge tower, a hard man with a scar like twisted leather down his cheek. By the king's hand, Renly said, we require entry to Magers. Lord Stark will speak with the queen. The hour is late, lord, the sergeant said. He had a Riverlands burr. Too many of Janos Slint's men came from the eastern wards and owed their place to one man's purse. Her grace's doors are closed. Come sunup, perhaps. Renly's smile was easy as a summer breeze. Take this much from a lord who has spent his life at court, sergeant. If the hand of the king says the doors are open, and the door stays closed, then all the men behind that door will wish they were moles in the earth come morning. Lower the bridge. The sergeant hesitated. Loras's hand rested on his sword hilt like it belonged there. Ned said nothing. He let the weight of his office sit on his shoulders and in his eyes. Lower, the sergeant barked. The chains groaned and the bridge clattered down, a sound like distant thunder. They went across in a low, dark column. The night pressed close, the holdfast looming like a crouched beast. Torches spat, casting long teeth of shadow across the planks. In the first courtyard, a handful of gold cloaks loitered. They straightened at the sight of Renly and Ned and took stock of the men at their backs. One opened his mouth, saw Loras Tyrell's focus settle on him like the point of a spear, and thought better of speech. Your posts, Ned said. Go nowhere unless called. Speak of nothing you've seen. I am Lord Hand, the eldest said, eyes flicking between Renly's men and Ned's face. Renly's 100 moved like a river of leather and rivet. They broke into teams in the dark. 2 for the queen's apartments, 2 to the prince's chambers, 1 to the queen's handmaidens' rooms to stop any runner. Renly and Loras went with the prince's party. Ned took the queen. He did not want to look at a sleeping boy and see what Robert had been and what he had failed to be. The corridor to the queen's suite was hung with Myrish tapestries depicting maidens with uncovered breasts being chased by stags that wore crowns. Ned kept his eyes on the seam where the plaster met the floor. 2 white-cloaked figures stood at the main door, Boros Blunt and Meryn Trant. The first was thick-necked with pig eyes. The second had a mouth like a knife slit. Neither looked as if he enjoyed thinking. Lord Stark, Boros said, the queen sleeps. Take your business away. Ned raised his cane and rapped the door once. By the king's hand, we enter. Stand Azide. Meryn Trant's hand settled on his sword pommel. Leave us your business. If you draw on me, Ned said, and let the air cool with his voice. You draw steel against the crown's lawful protector. If you force my hand, we will cut you down and step across you. Choose quickly. He heard their breathing. Behind him, he could feel the animal tension in Renly's men, leashed by training and fear of blood on a night when blood would change a kingdom. Boros Blunt licked his lips. Meryn Trant's little eyes flitted to the men in the passage and back to Ned's face. He had never been a courageous man, not in tourney nor in truth. The sword hand slackened. Stand aside, Boros muttered to Trant, and they did. Inside, the air smelled of lemons and warmed honey. The room was large, shadow-spoked by pillars carved into twisting vines. There were a dozen curtained doorways leading into inner chambers like secrets. Ned moved to the bedchamber and lifted the curtain. Cersei sat upright, fully awake, hair unbound across her shoulders like a spill of gold. She wore a green silk robe cinched at the waist, and she was smiling, though her eyes were knives. My Lord Hand, she said, you come late. My condolences for the king's indisposition. Your Grace, Ned said, you will come with me. To the king, to answer. She glanced past him at the shadows that held Renly's men. Her gaze found Meryn Trant on the threshold and Boros behind him and flicked over them in disgust. Answer? For what injury? For what crime does Robert summon me in the night like a whore with a trick to perform? For treason, Ned said. He had thought he would flinch at the word. He did not. The word sat hard as iron. Her smile thinned but did not go away. Treason. Such a simple mouthful to swallow. And what indeed has the queen done? Worn a pretty dress? Born a son with a better face than the ox who sired him? You have grown bold in your grief for Jory Castle, Stark of Winterfell. I have grown weary, Ned said. Your son is not the king's son, nor is your daughter the king's daughter, nor your youngest boy the king's boy. You will answer for it before Robert, who yet lives. If you resist, you will answer it before the headsman when he does not. She did not blink. Who told you this fair tale? Your wife's mooncalf sister? Or that sour priest Stannis? He's always envied my brothers and me. He must feel cheated, to be born a Baratheon and inherit none of Robert's appetites. The boy has golden hair, Ned said. So did the babes to come before him. He has your brother's jaw. How a northern pig becomes an expert in breeding is beyond me, Cersei said lightly. Come then, let us go and let us see this justice you've collected in your larder. Shall I wake my daughter? She'll want to choose a dress. My men will fetch the children, Ned said. You will come unarmed. If I come at all, another voice said from a side door. The Sandor Clegane came in as if the door needed making wider. Half his face was smooth as a courtier's and half twisted, melted long ago by fire. The eye under the scar shone darkly. He leaned on the doorframe as if it were a tavern post. Your men have steel, he went on. I have steel. That makes two sides. We could do this the hard song and get it over fast. Ned met the hound's gaze and saw a gleam in it that was not Lannister gold. Weariness, maybe, a hard sort of pity. You swore to Robert, Ned said. So did I. We are not foes this night. We do not shed the blood of those who sleep under the king's roof. Sandor's mouth stretched in something not a smile. You wear a clean shirt to a dung heap, Stark. But if you mean it true, I'll stand aside so long as the queen's whelp's not harmed. His voice dropped. He bites, that boy, and thinks himself a wolf. He will not be harmed, Ned said. He will be placed under guard. Cersei's eyes flashed, but her voice was smooth. You will fear you have not the first time he spits. He will be your ruin, Stark. There are some fires you cannot smother. Get dressed, Ned said. We go now. He waited outside the curtain while she moved like water and silk. He had no wish to watch. The men around him breathed loud. He could smell the lemon perfume, the sweat beneath. When Cersei emerged, she had put on a robe the color of dawn and a string of pearls that lay like a noose at her throat. I am ready, she said, and did not look at him. They went out together into the corridor where Renly came striding with 5 men and a boy in a torn nightshirt struggling in their grip. Joffrey's hair was a tangle of gold and his face was blotched with fury. Unhand me! He was shrieking, voice hoarse with indignation. Dogs! Oafs! I am your prince. I'll have you flayed. Where is my hound? Sandor. Sandor was there, big as a house, watching. Here I am, pup, he said. And if you were my prince, I'd gag you. Sire. Joffrey spat. He saw Cersei then and pulled hard. Mother, mother, they dare. Cersei touched his cheek. Hush, she said. The word was soft, and he stilled with the shock of it. She gave Ned Stark a look that would have curdled wine. You will regret this. Ned felt cold right through the heart, not for her threat. He had weathered worse, but for the boy's eyes. They had a hungry look, and a foolish one, and a kind of doom inside them that no well of mercy could drown. That was some poor thing's doing, not his. Take them, he said. Ser Alan with me. The procession slipped through Magers with surprising ease. Men looked and said nothing. The 100 swords were not garlanded with pomp, but with purpose, and purpose is persuasive. At the Tower of the Hand, Ned sent a runner ahead to wake Vayen Pool and light every torch. He took them to a high secure chamber with 2 doors and no windows save a narrow slit. He set his own household guard there, men he trusted. Tomard with his scarred brow, Fat Tom, Alan in his black surcoat with the direwolf's head embroidered by his lady's hand. You will be guarded, he told Cersei simply. You will be fed. You will be treated as befits your station. I will be treated as befits my person, Cersei said. "Do not confuse those. Guard the prince in the next chamber," Ned said to Alan. "They share the door only when I am present." "You cannot keep us here," Cersei said, and at last her control frayed. She showed that tiger's soul. "The city will rise. The city will breathe," Ned said, "and wake to a lawful heir." She laughed then, a clear, bright peal that made Loras Tyrell look down as if he were ashamed to hear it. "Oh, lawful! I hope the gods bless you with sons, Stark of Winterfell, who never ask you what lawful means. Go on then. Take your throne with your 100 swords and see if it keeps you warm." He left her there, pearls gleaming in the torchlight like a net of frost. On the landing, he found Renly leaning on the balustrade, looking down into the blackness of the yard. "You were right," Ned said. Renly did not turn. Not yet. They went to the king's bedchamber. The air in there was foul with sweet rot and the tang of boiled wine. Robert lay like a felled oak, one arm on the coverlet, a blot of dried blood at his lips. Pycelle dozed in a chair with his mouth open and his beard splayed, a ridiculous antiquity. Varys watched with his hands folded, face bland, eyes empty. "Your Grace," Ned said softly. He had always called Robert that as a jest on the road years ago. Now there was no jest. "Wake, Robert. I have done as we must." Robert's lids fluttered. He groaned and turned his big head, his eyes fixed and warmed with recognition. "Ned," he breathed. "Ned." "I am here." Ned took his hand, so big even now, and gripped. "We have the queen and the boy. They will answer in the morning. Sign this now while you breathe." He put the parchment in Robert's hand. Pycelle stirred and muttered. Varys tilted his head, which was not the same as frowning. The eunuch rarely frowned. What is it?" Robert slurred. "Your will," Ned said. "It names your brother Stannis your heir. It names me protector until he comes to take his place. Do you remember, Robert? We spoke of this." "Stannis," Robert said. His brow crumpled. "Proud as a goat, but he'll keep the realm. Damn him." He coughed and spat blood. His eyes found Ned's again. "You keep them from killing each other. Promise me, Ned." "I will keep your children safe," Ned said. The words tasted like a lie and a hope. "I swear it." Robert's dozing hand fumbled. He scrawled his name like a wound. Ned steadied the parchment and held it up to blow the ink dry. Pycelle wheezed awake and tottered over, peered, his lips making noiseless fishy shapes. He reached for the parchment, but Ned set it by the bed and placed a heavy paperweight, an iron stag, in its place. "Witnessed?" Varys said softly, and the word was a spider's step. "I am sorry for your pain, your grace." "Varys?" Robert said, and his big laugh tried to come up through the blood and failed. "You're always so sorry. Get me ale." "Ale is unkind to your wound," Pycelle quavered. "Give him the gods-damned ale," Ned said. Varys inclined his head and slipped away without seeming to move. Robert's hand squeezed Ned's hard. For an instant, there was strength in it. "You were always the godly one," he muttered. "Don't let the South make you soft. You hear me? Don't." He coughed again, a rattle, and his hand eased as if it had lost interest in gripping the world. Ned stood there a long time. When he left, Renly walked with him. They said little. The palace seemed quieter than it had been an hour ago, as if listening. They set their men to hold the gates and the armory, and Ned sent a messenger in the night to Dragonstone with the sealed will and an urgent summons. Another he sent to the city watch barracks to summon Slint to the Tower of the Hand at dawn. He sent riders to the city gates to order that no Lannister men be allowed passage, and he sent one to the docks to hold every westbound ship. He sent for Ser Barristan Selmy. It was near dawn when the Lord Commander came, white cloak clean despite the hour. He bowed to Ned with stiff courtesy. His hair, what remained of it, was as pale as snowdrift. "Lord Stark," he said, "you sent for me." "You swore to Robert," Ned said. "As did I." "I did. I have taken the queen and the boy into custody. There is proof of their bastardry. In the morning, the small council will witness it and present it to the king. He has signed a will naming Stannis his heir. I name you to command the city's defense and the king's guard until then. No harm is to come to O Cersei or to her children. Something in Barristan's lined face went soft and broke, as ice thins in spring. No harm shall come, he said. I am their sworn sword, but if what you say is true, then by my oath I am no longer their sword. I am the realm's. I will hold to that.
Ned nodded.
He had not realized until that moment how much he had wanted to hear those words. Barristan was a sword straight as winter. When dawn broke, pale and thin and ugly as a sick child, bells tolled from the September Robert. The city whispered, Robert, dying. The whispers ran ahead of Ned as he went to the council chamber. Pycelle was there, blinking. Varys, smooth as ever. Renly, lean and watchful. Littlefinger, draped like a cat at leisure. A small smile in the corner of his mouth like a trick you didn't want to see demonstrated. Lord Stark, Littlefinger said. What a night. A busy one, Ned said. He took the king's seat not because he loved it but because it was empty and he had work. His leg was a knot of pain. He put the parchment on the table, heavy with its seal. Where is the queen? Pycelle asked tremulously. In safekeeping, Ned said. With her children. Littlefinger's eyes brightened. Children? Which? All, Ned said. You move quick for a northern man, Littlefinger drawled. I'd think you'd prefer to compose a song about it before swinging a sword. Renly's hand tightened on the table. Spare us, he said. The realm is a knife's edge. Is it? Littlefinger glanced at the parchment. And is this the sharpened point? Ned laid the king's will open on the table. The wax gleamed. Robert's hand? Pycelle murmured, fingers hovering and then daring to touch, as if the ink were sacred. It is indeed. Stannis will claim, Renly said. His mouth made the word with a taste of something sour. He will put half the court's backs up and then break them over rules none of them have read. He is heir by law, Ned said. Littlefinger's eyes were lazy. The city is not law, my dear lord. It is appetite, and fear, and laughter. Law sits beneath, like bedrock. But we've both seen houses built rather cleverly on sand. And we've seen them fall, Ned said. He looked at Varys. Send for Janos Slint. Janos came in with his chest puffed and his little eyes sharp. He saw Renly's quiet men behind the door and the white cloak in the corner, and he tempered his swagger. My lord Hand, he began. I heard the bells. You will hear more, Ned said. The queen and her children are under guard. There may be unrest. You will set the watch to hold the gates and keep the peace. You will obey Ser Barristan's orders if he gives them. Janos's eyes flicked about. He was slower than Littlefinger but not stupid. You have them? He said. The boy. We do, Ned said. Janos wet his lips. This is bold. It will hearten the commons, to see traitors brought to heel. No man likes a queen who thinks herself above his law. You have my gold cloaks, Lord Hand. To the last man. He meant to sell them twice, Ned thought, once to me and once to whomever offered the heavier purse. I have no need of your words, he said. I need your people. You will obey. Ser Barristan. Janos swallowed and looked at Littlefinger, who smiled lazily at a spot on the wall. He looked at Renly and found nothing he could use. Finally he nodded. Aye. They released him and he left with a flourish. Ned's stomach sank. You will be my work, he thought, and a dirty work at that. When the bells changed, they beat a slower, deeper measure. The small folk begin to gather in the squares, a low susurrus rising like a tide. Robert's breath rattled. At mid-morning, Ned stood at his bedside with Pycelle hovering and Varys patient as an altar stone. Renly was there and behind Barristan. Robert stirred. His eyes opened, cloudy and far. Ned, he whispered. My brother. My children. They are safe, Ned said. He found the words were heavy with truth and as sharp as any lie. I hold them. Your will is made. Good, Robert whispered. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. We drank everything, didn't we? All of life poured down our gullets. And I never, his hand spasmed. Tell the boys about the time we gods, I can't. Ned squeezed his hand once, hard, and that was all the comfort he could give. Robert's eyes closed. His chest rose and fell. At noon he let out a long breath and did not draw another. They covered him with a sheet. Pycelle touted a prayer in a simpleton's sing-song. Varys bowed his head. Renly turned away, his mouth hard, and set his jaw as if it were a helmet he had forgotten to put on. Barristan Selmy stood very stiff and very straight. His old hands clenched behind him. The city outside found out all at once and made a noise like surf breaking on a winter shore. Ned Stark did not go to the throne room. He went to the small chamber where Cersei waited. He looked at her and saw a queen, yes. A girl who had never been told no, a mother, and a fox in a snare. She stood with her fingers on the pearls at her throat and looked back as if he were a ship arriving too late with good bread. "The king is dead," he said. She was still a long heartbeat. Then she inclined her head, just enough to avoid blasphemy. "He died as he lived," she said, "with the smell of wine on him." Ned held up the parchment. "He died having named his brother Stannis his heir. He died having named me protector until Stannis comes. You and your children will be well treated. You will not leave this room until we have presented the truth to court. Then you will be taken to the September, and there," her hand moved, quick as a snake. For a moment he thought she meant to strike him, but she merely lifted one of the pearls as if she found it plain and needed touching. "You believe you can keep me here," she said. "You believe you can keep Joff here. You think Stannis will come and the lords of the realm will line up like supplicants and hand him the crown on a cushion because that is what the law says. I remember you now. I was a girl when you came south with Robert the first time. You were very sure then." She leaned closer, and her voice was almost tender. "You are a fool, Stark, a decent one. Perhaps," he said, "but I am a fool with keys." Her eyes flicked to the door behind him and away. "Do you think you are first to try my doors? Every man who tries finds his hands full of splinters and smoke. Run along. Go sit on your chair. Make speeches about law and honor. Stannis will be grateful to have someone to scowl at when he is king." He left her there. He left Joffrey pacing and snarling and making rash threats that quenched themselves in the walls. He put on a plain black doublet and walked to the throne room with the will in his hand and the weight of Winterfell in his bones. The hall was full. The courtiers had scented change and come to watch it, hoping to drink it. The small folk crowded the lower steps. The air reeked of perfumes and fear. Ned mounted the steps and did not look at the iron throne as if it were a thing with teeth. He stood before it and wished it were a plain chair in a timbered hall. Renly stood to one side, Barristan to the other, Pycelle and Varys a little back, Littlefinger near the pillar where the shadows were most accommodating. Janos Slint had a knot of gold cloaks on the floor, their eyes everywhere and nowhere. Ned raised his voice, which had been tempered by winters and wolves. "The king is dead," he said. The words fell like stones. The hall became very quiet. Robert Baratheon died this noon. In his last hours he signed and sealed his will naming his brother Stannis Baratheon as his lawful heir. "Until Lord Stannis comes to claim his birthright, the will names me Lord Protector of the realm." He handed the parchment to Pycelle, who tottered up and read in a voice that shook but could not be ignored. When he finished, there was a rustling like many small things crawling. No one moved. Then Renly spoke. "The Queen's children," he said. "We must address their birth." "The Queen's children," Ned said, and his voice was iron, "are not the king's. They are by her brother Jaime Lannister. I have proof. We will put it before the court in full. For now, the Queen and her children are under guard for their own safety and for the safety of the realm." He saw the flickers then. Surprise, outrage, glee. He saw the men whose fortunes were bound to Lannister gold blanch and then compose themselves into show. He saw Littlefinger's eyes brighten briefly and go flat again, as if he had put something delicate back into its box. He saw Janos Slint lick his lips, A sound like a scuffle erupted at the door and then stopped. Varys turned his head a hair, listening. No new noise came. "The law is clear," Pycelle blustered, finding a scrap of courage now that the wind had chosen a direction. "The next brother inherits." "The law," Renly said, "is what we say it is in this room until men with horses say otherwise." He faced the hall. "I support Lord Stannis's claim." There was a ripple. Mace Tyrell was not present. He had gone back to Highgarden after the tourney, his pride pricked by his son's fortunes. The Reach's voice was thus Renly's to ventriloquize. From the Stormlands came murmurs of assent. From the Crownlands, a mutter of unease. From the West, silence. There were few Western lords in the hall, but the ones there looked at their shoes. "We will call a council of lords," Ned said. "We will send ravens to Dragonstone. Lord Stannis will be conducted to the city with ceremony. Until he arrives, I will hold the Red Keep and the city for the realm. The city watch will keep order. There will be no riots, no sack, no—" There was a disturbance near the lower doors, a rustle as when a fish fights a net. Sandor Clegane pushed through, his helm under his arm. He was not wearing Lannister crimson. He looked at Ned as if to measure him. "Your Grace, no, I suppose I ought to call you something more tedious," Sandor said. The hall bristled at the informality. "The Queen asks safe conduct to the September to pray." "You see," Littlefinger murmured, just loud enough for the corner where he stood to hear. "Even villains pray." "She will pray here," Ned said. "She is not to roam." Clegane shrugged. "I'll tell her. She'll like it as much as she likes anything." He glanced towards the knot of gold cloaks and Janos Slint, and his mouth hardened. "The streets are ugly today. Best you put regular men on the gates." "Ser Barristan," Ned said. "See it done." Barristan bowed and turned with a small patrol of white cloaks to confer with a captain of the watch whose face said he was an honest man who had forgotten what that required. As the hall emptied, Littlefinger came up the steps with a pleasant expression. "A neat morning's work," he said. "We should all rise earlier." "I have a task for you," Ned said. Littlefinger's eyes brightened. "You will open the treasury for me." "How bold you are!" Littlefinger laughed. "It does my heart good to see you embracing the Southron way at last. What coin is yours is also ours." Ned did not smile. "We will secure the loyalty of those who might be bought away from treason. We will ensure the watch is paid and their wives fed. We will purchase grain so the city eats quietly. You will show me the accounts. I will sign no advance on the free cities. We will not sell the future to survive the weak." Littlefinger's face went blank of amusement for a heartbeat. "You will have your ledgers," he said, soft and silky. "I will bring you figures. Men have been known to die of figures, you know. They stick in the throat." "Do not threaten me with arithmetic," Ned said. "I have been keeping accounts since I was 9. Then perhaps the realm rests in abler hands than I thought." Littlefinger bowed and drifted away, already bored. That afternoon, Ned wrote. He wrote to Ser Brynden Tully. To Hoster if Hoster could be found under his blankets of pain, to Yon Royce in the Vale, to Howland Reed in the Neck, to old lords and young across the Trident, to the Manderleys and Umbers and Karstarks in the north. It soothed him to write north, as if the word were snow on a burn. He wrote to Stannis with courtesy and urgency. He wrote to his wife, and those words were the hardest. He told her he loved her and that he would bring their girls home as soon as the city stopped teetering. At dusk, Ser Barristan returned with news that the watch had been set to the gates and the Lannister men confined to their quarters in the Red Keep. There was a scuffle in the barracks, a knife drawn. No blood. Sandor Clegane had collected the boy from the chamber and taken him to piss and returned with him without incident. Cersei had not asked again to go pray. "She is waiting," Barristan said. "For what?" Renly said. "For a moment that comes for everyone," Barristan said, and the steel in his voice surprised them. "The moment when your honors become your bindings." That night brought no quiet. Out in the city, the taverns poured grief and excitement in equal shares. In the Riverlands, a banner with a lion's crimson and gold went down in smoke. A farm was burned. a girl was carried screaming into weeds. In the west, Tywin Lannister read his raven and smiled without mirth. On Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon sat at a table shaped like Westeros and closed his hand upon the little tin crown over King's Landing. And in his bed that night, the first he could not call Robert's home, Ned Stark lay awake and counted the names of the men who might betray him before they betrayed themselves. He rose before dawn. The God's Wood in the Red Keep was a poor copy, a hot little court with graceless cypresses and a painted heart tree whose face had been cut by some bored king's son. He thought of Winterfell's heart tree with its sap like blood and the smell of wet earth and leaf rot. Here, the air smelled of waterweed and mortar. He whispered anyway. He put his forehead to the rough plaster and asked the old gods if they could hear him this far south, for the strength to hold law when it turned to rope. The next day was work in a whirlwind. The court convened. The proofs were laid out. The royal line's dark heads, the seed that followed the plow, the blonde Baratheon bastard with black hair. The book of lineages lay open like a priest's breast. Men argued and shouted. Cersei did not attend. Neither did Joffrey. Marjorie Tyrell's name glimmered unwritten in the margins of the world somewhere in the Reach, waiting for an ambitious pen. In mid-session, a runner came panting with a message from the docks. A sail on the eastern horizon. Not trade, not a galley. A bird with the fiery heart painted clumsily at the mast. Dragonstone's fleet was coming. Too soon, Renly muttered. He means to land before the city can be set. Good, Ned said. Let law be swift once, like a sword, and clean. They went to the ramparts. The day was bright, the river a fat green serpent. The ship came on steady as fate. Its decks were bare but for 10 men, and at the prow stood a lean figure in plain boots and a long cloak, who had the look of a man who still slept in armor even in his own house. Behind him stood a smuggler with the sea in his eyes. Behind them both, in her red robes, a woman with hair the color of dying coals watched the city with a hungry, curious smile. She is a fire priestess, Varys breathed near Ned's shoulder. From Ass High, they say. There are rumors she sleeps without dreams. May she drown in them, Renly said. Stannis brings mummers with him, I see. Not a mummer, the eunuch murmured. A shadow. They met in the throne room of the Red Keep because that was where kings were made to listen. Stannis Baratheon mounted the steps with a stride that did not forgive the stones for being in his way. His face might have been carved by an honest man. It had none of Renly's easy charm, none of Robert's thunder. Behind him the red woman glided like a tongue of flame. The smuggler, Davos, hung back, measuring everything with calm blue eyes. Lord Stark, Stannis said, and bowed a degree. He did not bow much. Lord Renly. Brother, Renly said. You have been busy, Stannis said to Ned. His gaze flitted to Barristan, to Janos, to the men at the doors. The Queen, under guard, Ned said. With the children. Good, Stannis said. Where is the paper? Ned placed the will in his hand. Stannis read it and his mouth moved as if he were chewing something tough. He nodded once. It suffices. The law is plain. I would have it witness you in this hall, Ned said, and the lords as we may gather. And then I would bring the queen. Stannis's eyes went to the throne and away. He did not touch it. He looked at his brother. Do not look at me, Renly said. Look at the law you cherish so much. I see it, Stannis said, and I see your play also. You were here with men in the night. Good. For once you did not wait for a horn to tell you a horse is coming. Renly's mouth tightened. I did what needed doing. You did what made you matter, Stannis said without heat. To Ned he said, bring the queen, bring the boy, bring the girl if you must. Ned sent Sandor Clegane and Barristan together. He did not trust little kindnesses to hold where bigger ties had frayed. While they waited, Stannis looked at the priestess. She had a look like a cat watching a bird. This is Melisandre, Stannis said in a tone that made a name a kind of shield. She has seen in the flames the death of kings and the fall of walls. She says there is a war coming colder than any we have known, and that there is a god who loves fire. I know gods that love winter, Ned said. He found he could not help it. If she loves fire, keep her away from my men. She speaks truths others do not wish to hear, the Red Woman said. Her voice was music too, notes too low to be innocent. Lord of Winterfell, there is a darkness in the north that eats horses and men. It will wake and come with knives of cold. You will need a king who burns. I need a king who keeps his word, Ned said, and a city that keeps its bread. Sandor returned with Cersei after a time that tasted like iron. Joffrey came with her despite Ned's orders. He had fought Sandor at first and then decided it suited him to walk in as if he had been invited. Myrcella and Tommen were left where they were, guarded by men who did not smile. The hall held its breath when Cersei entered. She wore mourning. She wore it so beautifully that men forgot what mourning meant and remembered only what beauty was. She stopped inside the door and let her glance touch Stannis like a lash. Brother-in-law, she said, my condolence on your newfound courage to travel. Your children are not the king's, Stannis said. You have committed high treason. The penalty is death. Kneel and beg the mother's mercy, while there is time to look as though you understand the meaning of the words. Cersei smiled without showing teeth. Oh, Stannis, she said lightly, you were always so pretty with commands, and so laughable when no one obeyed them. Joffrey puffed. I am the king, he said. He half-turned, scanning for someone to agree. You are not, Stannis said with the fairness of a blade. You are a bastard born of incest. The word, spoken plain, rolled through the hall like breaking glass. For that alone you should thank the man who made you not the heir. Joffrey looked as if he would burst. Sandor's hand was on his shoulder, heavy as a chain. In mercy, Ned said, and the word tasted foreign. The girl and the youngest boy can be sent to Casterly Rock. They will live as wards. The boy will forswear lands and titles. The girl will be betrothed as the crown wills. The queen, Stannis said, will be tried by the faith and hang if she denies and is found guilty. Else she will be kept where she can do no harm. Cersei laughed softly. You'll find the faith very faithful to whoever holds the keys to the sept's chest. Renly moved then, quick as his thought. A compromise, he said. The court is raw. The city's temper is ugly. Let the queen be kept within the September under the care of the High Septon until the lords assemble. The faith will preen and be grateful. The commons will be soothed by the spectacle of one who thinks herself above kneeling learning to kneel. Stannis's jaw worked. He hated to give an inch. Davos leaned in and murmured something that made the corners of Stannis's mouth twitch like a man tasting salt where he wanted sweet. Very well, he said. She is nothing to me until she is a rope. The boy. His gaze took in Joffrey, who was breathing now as if he had run. The boy will be kept in the White Sword Tower under Ser Barristan's eye. He will have tutors. A mouth can be taught to close. He will bite you, Sandor said. His voice was mild. It made the words crueler. And he will chew his own tongue when he learns his place, Stannis said without flinch. It was done. The queen was escorted to the sept between lines of men in brown and white, the hound walking behind her like a scowl. Joffrey went to the White Sword Tower and shouted for an hour and then bit his nails until they bled. Myrcella wept until she fell asleep. Tommen asked for his cat. That night, the city breathed again, raggedly. Stannis slept on a hard bed in a room not large. Renly did not sleep. Ned slept in a chair and dreamed of snow. Ravens flew. The Vale answered not at all. Lisa Arryn sent back a letter that smelled of perfume and said nothing but was wounded with innuendo. The North answered with one voice. For law and protector. The old lords penned their seals. The Riverlands answered with relief, their outriders emboldened by the promise that the crown was not a lion's toy. The Reach sent polite vagueness and baskets of pears. The Westerlands sent nothing. None of this surprised Ned, and all of it disappointed him. In the west, Tywin Lannister buckled on his sword and gave his son Jaime command to ride on Riverrun with 50 banners. In the Trident, Edmure Tully bit his nails and ordered his men to hold the fords, fretting like a woman with a household to manage and no flour. In the north, Robb Stark stood in the hall at Winterfell with grey wind at his heel, and looked at the men who had answered his call to fight for his grandfather's lands, and found he did not need to become a king if his father did not die. He marched anyway because a fire in the Riverlands does not care who brings water, only that someone does. Ned Stark kept the city. He did it with dull, stubborn work. He paid the watch on time with coin wrested from Littlefinger's smiling hands. He made a proclamation banning the carrying of blades longer than a handspan in the streets. Sandor Clegane carried one anyway and dared any man to tell him to stop, and because he escorted the boy who was not a king and because he killed only when insulted beyond endurance, he was allowed. He appointed 3 justices to sit in the markets and hear the common complaints. He listened to their reports late into the night, and more often than not he sided with the baker over the Lord Steward because the baker's work fed men and the steward's fed only pride. He sent the Red Keep's men to repair the smashed aqueduct near the Dragon's Gate. He made the granaries count and recount. He saw his daughters when he could. Sansa had learned a certain stillness he did not like, an armor of good posture. She asked when she could go home as if she were asking when the weather would turn fair. He told her soon, always soon, and felt the lie roost like a bird on his shoulder. Arya was harder to find, but he set a guard to shadow her, and they did as well as any man could with a shadow who preferred to be a boy and disappear. She came to him one afternoon, on with a split lip and less hair than the day before, and he forbore to ask. He saw Catelyn once. She came south with a small escort as far as the neck and then turned back, messages sliding between them like fish in a cold stream. He slept with the smell of her hair in his mind and woke with the taste of copper. Stannis took the small council's chair with as much grace as he had for any chair. He made lists. He read reports. He spoke little, and when he did he carved. Renly sat and smiled and whispered and left to walk among the men and make them like him. Ned watched them both and counted the hours until they would pull in opposite directions hard enough to break the rope between them. He did not have to wait long. Renly found 1,000 ways to say, "The people love me." Stannis found 1,000 ways to say, "The law loves me." Littlefinger poured oil wherever friction promised a spark. Varys listened and smiled and came to Ned late at night like a cat, with scraps of truth that tasted too rich not to swallow. "The Lannister host is swollen," Varys said one such night. He looked at Ned's maps as if they were a garden. Ser Stafford drills boys in the west. Lord Tywin rides near the Golden Tooth. Jaime Lannister presses the siege at Riverrun and is like to break it if left alone. Your son has called his banners. Ned's heart tightened and loosened at once. Robb should have stayed, he said, nearly to himself. But he goes for his mother's blood. I cannot fault him. Then do not, Varys said. Blame the lions who drew the first blood. But you must send him aid, or recall him, or you will soon be forced to make the king's justice in the ruins of a Tully castle. May I suggest sending Lord Renly west with a handsome host? He will like the music of it, and Lord Stannis will like that his brother is very far away while he learns how to be obeyed. Ned said nothing for a long time. He thought of sending Renly away and of keeping him, of sending Stannis and keeping him, of sending no one and watching Jaime Lannister throw Edmure into his own river. He asked for paper and wrote orders for Lord Mace Tyrell to muster at Bitterbridge under Renly's banner. He wrote to Robb, commanding him to hold at Moat Cailin until he had news. He wrote to Edmure to hold and to Brynden to strike in the night if he could. He wrote to Tywin Lannister and asked him to consider the weight of treason and mercy. He sent the last letter with a courier who would surely die somewhere in the Westerlands. The weeks that followed were a hammer striking iron. Renly went south and west with the Reach's green tide swelling under him. He wore a crown of antlers he had no right to and smiled and did not call it a crown. He took Bitterbridge by standing in the square and lending his charm to the merchants. And then Mace, proud as bread that has risen, gave him his men. They were 10,000 and then 20, sweet-smelling and eager, and then more. Mace Tyrell huffing along with his panoply and his son Loras shining like a knife, and behind them some of the most dangerous farmers in the realm, those who had learned to plow and fight with equal zeal. Stannis, in the meantime, did not bend. He did not charm. He replaced Janos Slint quietly, and the man bellowed like a bull until 2 of Stannis's hard knights carried him to a cell, and Justice Karen, of Stannis's men, took the watch. He ordered the city's armories inventoried and found that someone had sold half the spears to Free City caravans and replaced them with walking sticks. Littlefinger was distressed to hear it, and even more distressed to find Ned had the accounts to prove it. Stannis exiled Pycelle to the Citadel to write a book about what he had forgotten. And the old man wept. He did not exile Varys nor Littlefinger, and that told Ned something he did not like. Cersei knelt in the September by daylight and sharpened herself by night. She sent birds that no one saw. She whispered to her guards in ways that did not look like whispers. She tried to poison her staunchest jailer's wine and failed because the man did not drink and because Arya had told the cook that the queen had lingered longer than usual by the milk. Ned did not think too hard about how his daughter knew that. Joffrey learned nothing. He broke a lute in a tantrum and cut his own hand. Sandor wrapped the hand and did not flinch when the boy called him dog. The boy called him dog a dozen times after that to see if the word would bite. It did not. Robb Stark came down the neck with more men than he had expected because the North was hungry for a fight they could name. He found the twins and negotiated, grim-faced, with Lord Frey, and passed with a price that would someday come due. He rode east and his outriders swept through westerling lands like wolves through a flock, mean and necessary. He crossed the Green Fork with the Karstarks and Umbers making jokes about how deep it ran and met Jaime Lannister in the night in a field full of dark wheat and took him alive when Grey Wind lunged and knocked the Kingslayer from his saddle. The song would be better someday than the fight had been. Robb sent Jaime chained with a note to Ned. This one is for your list. The city breathed easier when the rumor came that Jaime was taken. The men-at-arms told each other at the winemongers that Lannister luck had broken. The courtiers wore relief like perfume. Tywin Lannister answered in his way. He cut a swath through the riverlands that made men flinch. He did not come to the city. He did not need to. When Renly's host met Robb's envoys to coordinate, the paper smelled of mead and was flecked with grass stains. Renly sent it back with a ribbon and a joke. He moved north and then swiveled toward the west like a dancer changing partners. His 1,000 banners like a field of flowers caught and carried on a flood. He did not do what Ned had asked. He did what Renly always did. He chose the road that made him shine. Stum. Nis learned this and did not shout. He threaded his fingers together and his knuckles whitened. He will turn the war into a pageant, he said. He will steal the victory and call it his. Let him, Davos said quietly. So long as the victory arrives at all. Ned held the city. The Red Keep's corridors grew to know his steps. The courtiers learned the feel of his temper. Low, steady, unbending, as if the room had filled with a river that was not ruffled by their flutters. He earned a name as dull as he was, and it was a good name for a man who meant to save lives. After 3 moons, Renly rode back to the city with 40,000 men under banners that merrily ignored the law. He made a camp at the height of the Hill of Rainies and lit 1,000 cookfires as if it were a holiday. He entered the Red Keep with Loras at his side and a new, bright crown on his head because he had tired of pretending. The realm needs a king men can love, he said in the throne room, and his voice was honey poured into a pot you did not see the bees floating in. Lord Stannis is all iron. Iron bends only to break. The storm lands and the reach acclaim me. Let us make peace like kinsmen. Let Stannis go to Dragonstone and keep his rock. Let him be my hand, if pride allows it. Lord Stark can go home. The boy and girl can be sent to the rock or the sept as they choose. We can stop the burning. The hall murmured. Even men who hated him found their chins nodding. Even men who loved Stannis understood the comfortable appeal of a crown that smiled. Stannis's mouth flattened until it disappeared. You make play of rebellion, he said. You deck us all in baubles and call it duty. The law is not a toy. The law is the bones of the realm. If you usurp, the bones break, and the realm crawls forever after. Then we must set the bones carefully, Renly said, and the patient must find a reason to live that is not pain. Brother, I speak for the living. You speak for a page. Lord Stark. He turned suddenly, laying his hands out as if begging for alms. You saved us all with your swords and your carefulness. You did more with dullness than I thought a man could. Now see, we are at a fork. One road is paved with rules and ends with a city angry and a realm at war for years, starving. The other road is paved with poets and ends with flowers. Ned looked about the hall and saw faces he had come to know. A baker whose son had been pressed for the watch, a seamstress who had stitched Sansa's torn gown, a petty lord whose hands shook when he spoke too loud. He saw Barristan Selmy, whose honor had bled and was now stitched. He saw Varys with his mouth bland, and Littlefinger with his eyes very bright. He saw Davos Seaworth, who had only his hands and his courage, and Melisandre, who was like a candle in a room with too much air. He thought of a boy who had not asked to be born and could not help his face. He thought of a woman who had done a thing the realm would never forgive and perhaps could never understand. He thought of the North. "Renly," he said slowly, "you could be a good king, clever one anyway, and perhaps men would eat in peace for a time. But your crown would bleed law. It would teach the lords that being loved is a better right than being born. Someone prettier will always come along. And then what?" Renly's laughter was soft. "Then they'll unseat him and put me back, if they have any sense." "No," Ned said. "Men are not so constant. They follow fires. If we train them to love the fire more than the hearth, everything burns." He turned to Stannis. "And you," he said, "you would keep every law and break every man to do it. You would stand on truth and let the wind cut you. You would not bend. Sometimes, my lord, in winter the branches that bend live and the ones that do not snap. I have no love for bending. I have only sense. But I am the protector. My duty is not to love but to give the realm its bones. You are the king." "So," Stannis said. He did not smile. "So," Renly said, and his eyes went flat. "I did not think, when I came to you that night with my 100 swords, that I was rescuing a church sermon. If you had not," Ned said, "you might be dead with the city burning. What happens now is your doing as much as mine." "Spare me," Renly said, and his voice lost its quicksilver. "I make my own doings. If you set Stannis above the world, then you throw away the only rope. You will watch him choke the city." He left the hall like a storm leaving a coastline. Loras went with him, his face closed as if it were a visor. The Reach Lords drifted out like a flock. The Storm Lords hung a moment, torn between thunder and blossom, and then followed their smiling lord. Mace Tyrell bowed heavily, saying nothing and everything. Melisandre watched them go and put her hand on Stannis' sleeve. "Let him go," she said. "He will be made shadow in the end." "See that he is not made murder first," Ned said sharply. "The gods we keep here do not let brothers kill brothers without catching the blood in a bowl and showing it to everyone." He did not know why he said it. He saw horrid things in the woman's eyes, red reflections. Davos's jaw tightened. Stannis did not answer. He went to the painted table late that night and moved wooden ships across the mouth of the Blackwater and set his jaw on his own patience, which was a thing like iron filings. A fortnight later, Tywin Lannister's host pulled back from the Trident like a snake tired of chewing an ox and slithered to the west. It had been a bad summer for lions. A raven came with a white ribbon from Riverrun. Robb had relieved the castle and brought Edmure out on a pallet, alive and stubborn. Another came with a black ribbon. Lord Karstark's boys were dead, murdered by Lannister outriders. Ned wrote to Lord Karstark and asked him to hold his wrath. He knew from the way the quill tore the paper that his words would not be enough. That night, Littlefinger came why. Take a suggestion wrapped in innocence. Send Joffrey to the Rock with a guard of your men. Let Cersei go. Tristan and Isolde should be together. He smiled. Or whatever their names are in this tired play. The boy stays, Ned said. He found he did not hate Littlefinger. Hate was a sharper thing than this. A slow distaste, like something left too long in the sun. I will not barter a child. You are protector, Littlefinger said mildly. You barter children's fates with your every breath. You choose for them. That is what crowns do. You could choose to end this sweetly. I will end it lawfully, Ned said. One of these will be your epitaph, Littlefinger said. It is a matter of luck which. The days cooled. The city was less stinking in the morning. Bread cost what it had before. The people began to watch the Red Keep with interest instead of with hunger or fear. They had not seen this before. A government that was dull and fed them could not last. Snow never lasted here. But for the span of 3 moons the city was a little like a farm that had been fenced. Word came from Winterfell that a white raven had flown from the citadel. Autumn declared. Ned stood on the ramparts in the early morning light with the city yawning awake under him, and thought of frost on the ground back home. He would have liked to see it. He would not. Renly did not sit in idleness. He took Tumbleton and Bitterbridge and spun courtiers into banners and banners into coin. He sent letters to Old Town and married Marjorie Tyrell in a ceremony that made songs forget the war for a day. He called himself king, and the Reach called him light and happiness, and the Stormlands called him wind. Stannis called him traitor. Ned called him dangerous and necessary. They were at dinner, if one could call bowls of stew and a heel of bread dinner, when a courier stumbled in and thrust a dispatch at Stannis. The man smelled of hard riding and fear. Stannis read and his knuckles went white. He passed the parchment to Davos. Davos read and swore under his breath. What? Ned said. The room went quiet. Even the Red Woman ceased to watch the candle flame. Renly is dead, Stannis said. He spoke the words like a sentence he had not wanted to pass but found himself obliged to. In his own tent at Storm's End, on the eve of battle, his throat cut. There were no guards who saw. No one entered. They say the shadow of a man did it. Ned's blood went cold, as if someone had poured the north into him in one sharp draught. What man's shadow? He said quietly. Stannis did not blink. He did not look at Melisandre, though the room did. A shadow with my face, he said. The silence in the room was so full it had density. Melisandre's lips curved the way a blade does when it is being made. Davos's eyes closed as if he had seen a gull fall off a cliff. You killed him, Ned said. He knew he did not sound like a lord. He sounded like a man whose notions had been broken across his own knee and left pieces he could not assemble. You killed your brother with some trick from your witch. Stannis's face creased. It might have been pain. I did not go into his tent. I did not hold the knife. I prayed for a way to save the realm. The Lord of Light showed me a path. The Lord of Light? Ned the Northern man said contemptuously, but his voice shook. What of the Lord of Men? What of the law? The law would have me fight him in a field and kill 1,000 for him, Stannis said, and for once his voice rose. The law would have me wait while Tywin steals the west and the Dornish light their own little fires and the north breaks for being made to kneel again. The law would have me admire my brother while he broke what we built because he smiled better than I. The law asked for patience. I gave it patience and it gave me a dead city. The Lord of Light gave me a way. A way to murder your brother in the dark, Ned said. What would you have had me do? Stannis demanded. Throw him in chains in front of his banners? That would have brought their spears to my heart. Offend the Tyrells and set 1,000 starving mouths against us? You prize dullness and dullness has served you. I needed the opposite. Ned looked at him and saw a man who had gnawed on justice until it bled. He looked at Melisandre and saw a fire consuming, and in the spaces where the flame had already eaten there was nothing left but black. He looked at Davos and saw sorrow. You will never have my love, Ned said, and you will always have my respect. It is more than most give me, Stannis said, and his voice went flat again. Renly is dead. The Reach will scatter like birds when you clap your hands. The Stormlands will come to me or I will burn their castles to charcoal. The Tyrells will turn to the Lannisters if we do not take their coin and their flour before winter. We move. Move, Ned said wearily. They moved. They moved in numbers that made the Red Keep seem too small to hold a map. They moved with Davos's sailors ferrying men like beads on a string across the Blackwater to gather on the south bank. And they moved with courtiers who suddenly found Stannis fascinating. and with Tyrell envoys wearing black veils who spoke of grief and of alliance in the same smooth sentence. They moved while Littlefinger smiled and wrote notes on good parchment, and met a man from High Garden at midnight to discuss the price of a girl who did not yet know she would be sold. They moved while Varys sent birds to places where there were no perches and returned with information that could be bought only with shame. The war for King's Landing never broke into the city in that summer. It gathered at a distance like thunder you count. It made men in the street look up and wonder at clouds. It took shape in courtyards far from the Gate of the Gods, where old men practiced with spears until their shoulders ached and went home to drink to dull the ache. It took shape on painted tables and in bedchambers where women spoke very quietly to men with hard hands. It took shape in the Red Keep, where Ned Stark set the watch and paid the baker, and in a tent at Bitterbridge where Mace Tyrell cried, and on a galley where Davos Seaworth bared his handless wrists to show another man what loyalty costs. When the blow fell, it fell in the west. Robb Stark's outriders took a Lannister baggage train and burned the Lion's Sown on its silk. Edmure rallied and threw Tywin back at the Red Fork. Tywin turned his horse and looked east and did not ride. The Dornish prince sent a letter in a careful, flowing hand that said nothing in a way that meant everything. The veil was a curtain drawn, Lysa's fear palpable even in ink. The North held. Cersei went to trial. She stood in the September and smiled at the mother and gave testimony dripping with contempt and cleverness. She lied. She did not lie. Evidence was produced. The High Septon perspired. The small folk murmured like the sea. When she was found guilty, the sound in the September was like the breath a city had been holding for a year. She was sentenced to life in a tower in the Red Keep's highest corner, with 3 women to attend her and no knives. Ned thought that mercy. Joffrey screamed that it was worse than death. Perhaps it was. Perhaps it was kindness. On the day Cersei was taken to her new home, she paused on the stair with the light behind her and looked back at Ned and said, "You have not won. You have only made the game harder." "I do not play," Ned said. "I do not know the rules." "You never needed to," she replied. And when the door closed, she was the only creature behind it who looked like she was home. When winter came on the wind, it came cautiously to King's Landing. It only edged the nights with cool, made the river breathe pale in the mornings, settled frost like milk around the Red Keep's feet. Ned took his daughters to the quay to watch the gulls and listen to them speak for the first time in months, as if their mouths were their own again. He thought of taking them home. He promised them he would. He wrote to Robb that he loved him and was proud of him and that the lion was wounded but not dead. He wrote to Jon at the Wall, if the boy had received any of his earlier letters, and told him to set his heart like stone against the cold because the city had taught him a little about cold that had no snow in it. He wrote to Catelyn that he would be a husband again and that he would bring Sansa and Arya north and then come back if he must, though he never wanted to see this Red City again. He did not go. Men rarely keep the promises that would make them happy. He held the throne not as his own, but he sat it often, to save his leg from aching while he listened to petitions. He listened to a bricklayer complain of a merchant who did not pay, and he listened to a lord of the casks complain of a levy he could well afford. He recognized faces and remembered names, and little by little a city came to believe that its rulers knew it in return. Once, when the air was sharp, he dreamed of Winterfell so clearly that he woke with the taste of the kitchen's beef and barley stew in his mouth. He thought then, for a terrible moment, that he could simply walk down to the stables and take a horse and ride. He thought that if he did, the city would sort itself like an untangled skein. He thought of Stannis and Renly and Tywin and how the skein would knot again around their ankles. He rose and went to sit in a place where he was a stone and men had to flow around him. When the ravens came black and frantic one autumn morning, they came from the east as well as from the north. They brought word of ships with sails like wings and men with skin like the inside of a ripe figure. They brought rumor of a girl with silver hair and the ancient name. Ned read and did not read. He had promised himself to this side of the narrow sea. He had promised the city law. He sent the ravens on to Stannis and to the lords and to the wall. He went that evening to the gods' wood under the red sky and put his hand on the painted tree and whispered to the old gods for luck, He did not believe in and courage he had already spent. He had taken the throne with 100 swords not because he wanted to sit it but because someone had to keep it from being dragged into the street. He had broken a dozen rules and bent 3 dozen more and learned how to be a Southerner while staying a Northman. He had lost a friend and saved a city. He had made a king who would never love him and an enemy who would always respect him. He had kept his children alive. He had kept alive, which in this red city was a distinction some weeks. On the tower above him, the queen who would never be queen watched the sun bleed out behind the hills and did not weep. In the White Sword Tower, a boy who would not be a king chewed his nails and spit the blood and felt the shape of an emptiness he could not name. In a ship in the mouth of the Blackwater, Davos Seaworth whispered a prayer to a god of light he had never loved and another to a god of storms who had never listened. In Old Town, a maester sharpened a quill to write the words autumn again and thought of winter with a childish thrill that old men never lose. In the north, snow fell on Winterfell stones early and lay in the hollows for a week. Bran Stark looked up into a sky so wide that it made him feel as if he could fly again and did not cry. Robb Stark, camped on the borders of the West, learned that sometimes a victory is a winter cloak. It keeps you alive but gives you weight. In the West, Tywin Lannister stood in a hall full of banners and counted men and knew that numbers would, for once, not do, because his name had been bloodied not by a sharper name but by dullness, the kind of dullness that feeds people and makes them trust. He resolved to teach the city a lesson about what sorts of brightness men would follow when their bellies were airy empty. In Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon stood at the painted table with the Red Woman at his shoulder and thought about law and brothers and the ways a king must keep his own counsel. He did not smile. He did not sleep. He was a sword hammered without any ornament, and he did not care if the men who had to follow him liked how it cut. Ned Stark, in King's Landing, breathed out and breathed in and went back to work. He did not know how long law could keep winter. He only knew that each day he could make it bite less. He had broken his long habit of waiting for a good choice to appear. He had taken the bad choice and made it into a bridge that others could cross without drowning. Perhaps this was what it meant to be a hand, to put your own fingers under the grinding wheel so it would spare someone else's. He did not think of heroism. He thought of bread, and of ravens, and of men's names. And when, late that night, he stopped by the room where his girls slept, Sansa neat and folded, Arya sprawled with her mouth open, he thought that he could live 100 years in this red city and never feel the red seep into him so long as he had this sight. He closed the door. He went to draft a summons for a fishmonger who had cheated his customers with lead. He wrote slowly, carefully, with a hand that did not shake. Law is a stubborn thing, he thought. Let us see who tires first. And the candle burned down and did not gutter, because for once, for a time, there was no wind. The morning after the raven brought Renly's death, the city woke brittle as glass. The bells did not ring. Men spoke low in doorways. Vendors, who had lately taken to bawling optimism with their onions, measured their voices and their scales both, as if the wrong loudness might shatter the day. Ned drew back the shutter in his solar and breathed the river's damp and told himself the city would not break so long as the bread held. Renly had gone south after his storm in the throne room, taking the green tide with him as swiftly as a knife pulled from a sheath. His banners had rippled away across the Rose Road and then veered like birds, first west to flatter the Mander, then abruptly east, a lover remembering a promise, down through the Stormlands toward the seat he coveted out of family as much as fury. Storm's End had been his stage once. It would be his stage again. And then the courier brought word of a tent opening onto dark, of a scream no man could say he heard because their mouths were too full of disbelief, of a throat cut by shadow. The tale would fatten with the telling. Stannis said the truth. Renly was dead. Everything that moved in the realm altered its path to avoid the new stone set in the river's bed. Ned stood where the light fell on the table and found his hands flat on the wood, as if to steady it. "We hold the Tyrells," he said aloud, because he needed to hear it in the air, not only in his head, "or we lose the realm." Varys had come at dawn and vanished again, leaving behind only the faint smell of spice and the impression of silk drawn across the surface of water. Littlefinger had stayed away, his absence the most present thing about him. Stannis had not slept and did not pretend he had. He looked toward Dragonstone on the map as if it were a man who had disappointed him and would surely do so again. The Reach will be looking for a way to forgive itself for following treason, Stannis said. He stood with his iron hands behind his back, Melisandre a small flame at his elbow, Davos a cooler shape a step behind. They may take it from us, or from Tywin Lannister. They will look at our laws and his gold. They will choose what keeps their bellies round and their necks untroubled. They will choose what flatters them, Melisandre murmured. All men choose the face that smiles at them in the fire. We will not let them, Ned said. We will give them something better than flattery. We will give them terms that do not shame them and a place in the peace to come. You speak as if it is yours to give, Stannis said. It is mine. The peace, Ned asked mildly. The terms, Stannis said, and the old harshness was comfort as much as insult. I will not sell the throne for pears and compliments. Then don't, Davos said, simple as a sailor's knot. Sell it for ships and fields. Melisandre's red eyes found the smuggler and almost smiled. The Onion Knight finds poetry when he means to barter. I find food and send it where it's needed, Davos said. If that's poetry, I'll sing until winter breaks. They broke the fast on bread a little stale and honey too sweet and meat that tasted of the smoke it had taken on the hook. When the sun rose onto the water and turned the river to beaten metal, banners bloomed at the far gate like cautious flowers. The Reach had come to talk. The first embassy was not a lord with gold thread in his sleeves. It was a barge wide and clean, a canopy bright as summer, and in its shade an old woman in weeds, an old man in velvet who had grown too fond of sauces, and a girl in pale green who wore her widowhood like a ribbon she had been taught to tie in a mirror. They made a pretty picture coming ashore at the King's Landing quay. The small folk clucked and pointed. The old woman's cane tapped the boards with a rhythm that would have made a drummer look over. Lady Olenna of House Tyrell studied the city with her bright little eyes and did not blink when she saw the Red Keep's hard lines standing on the hill like a fist. She looked like someone who had once laughed at a king and meant it. Ned met them in the solar, with the light behind him so that the courtiers could not read his face too easily. Lady Olenna did not need light. She saw well enough. My condolences, she said, settling into a chair as if it were an enemy to be mastered. Renly was ridiculous and charming. Men who are both do not last. My granddaughter is a widow again. You have a talent for king widows in this city. Not my talent, Ned said, and took no offense because none was offered. My sorrow for your loss, my lady, for all our sakes. The girl in green, Marjorie, kept her eyes down until she raised them, quick and sure. She was pretty in a way that had been made to look as if it were effortless and was not. Ned watched her watching him. She measured not his height nor his sword, but the distance between what men said and what they did. We come with grief, said Mace Tyrell heavily, and with the Reach's grain, which the city will need if it does not wish to gnaw its own bones when winter comes. We come as friends to the crown and to old alliances with the Stormlands. And to new ones, said the old woman, just louder than Mace's last word. If we must. We must, Ned said. They traded courtesies. The bread and salt were already eaten. Peace was not purely symbolic today. When the cups had been sipped and the servants gone, Olenna set her stick across her knees and said, almost conversationally, Who rules here, the man who frowns, or the man who looks north? Both, Melisandre said from the hearth, and Lady Olenna rewarded her with a glance she might have used on a clever cat. The king, Ned said, and the law. Oh la, said Lady Olenna. We tried that once in my youth. Drier than stale crusts. I prefer bread with a little fat to it. Your law is hard. Your king is harder. My son, and she did not bother to disguise the small sigh, is soft, but he is not a fool when properly led. He will house his softness under your iron if it suits the reach of his reach. I have come because you have girls. She had a talent for taking a hall's breath. Marjorie's mouth did not change. Mace made a noise like a bull who had been prodded with a stick from an unexpected angle. "My daughters," Ned said, quieting his temper because anger was a luxury bought with coin he did not have. "Yes, pretty girls," Lady Olenna observed. "One that knows it and one that does not. The one that does not is always the treasure. But I will not spend your children. I will spend mine. I have a grandson, Willis, who is gentle and clever and lame. You have a daughter who has been promised to more trouble than any girl deserves. I would see them joined." Sansa's name was not spoken, but it filled the room. Ned's fingers moved on the arm of his chair before he stilled them. He felt Renly's night all over again. A door opening on a choice that was not what he would have wanted if the world were kinder, and could not be refused if the world remained itself. "Sansa is young," he said. "So is Willis," Olenna said kindly. "They can be young together. She will not have to pretend a boy with a wolf's teeth can love her. Willis likes gardens. He likes hounds. He likes to read. He likes to listen when a woman talks, which is rare as hens with teeth, I find. He has learned patience when the world is short of it. My son is soft, as I said, but Willis has a spine. I should know. I am his. What do you wish in return?" Stannis asked, stepping into the shape conversation had carved for him. He did not pretend at softness. "Say it cleanly." "Grain now," Olenna said. "And men, if you ask for them to finish this lion hunt. We will not starve on our carts while you count the cracks in your laws. We will send coin and cooks too, for this city has been eating soup pretending it is broth and I cannot stand it. We will, in time, want Loras in white as much for his own sake as for our pride. He will serve you honestly for the memory of a king you did not choose. It will be his way of mourning." And her voice gentled there, which made even Melisandre tilt her head. "And if your king is truly a king, he will not fear trusting a reach boy with vows to keep him from mischief. We will want a place in what comes next that does not require us to curtsy to a Lannister. The last we can give," Ned said. "The rest we should weigh with scales that are not our tongues." "Take your time," Olenna said. "I am old. I know how to wait, but take it quickly. There are others who do not know how to." Marjorie spoke then, turning to Ned with a frankness that might have been a weapon or a virtue. "Lady Sansa will be safe in Highgarden, my lord, and happy, if happiness is possible for a girl who has seen what she has seen. I do not say it because I am good. I say it because I intend it and I can." Ned believed her. He did not know if that belief came from the hard place of necessity or from the boy inside him who had once wanted Southern songs to be true for a day. Either way, he nodded. "We will send for Willis," Mace said, swelling with relief as if a seam had been let out of his tunic. "We will feast." "You will not," Stannis said. "You will give your men over to captains with maps sharper than yours and tell your cooks to cook for the city. You will feast when the West is quiet and not before." Mace's mouth opened and closed. Lady Olenna's eyes danced. Marjorie inclined her head to Stannis like a queen who had learned to be gracious to a difficult ally. Ned thought, "If this is to work, it will be because some of us learn to swallow what we do not like." That afternoon, Ned told Sansa. He did it in his chamber because he did not think a girl should be handed a life in a hall with strangers, even if that was the way of things. Sansa stood and listened and did not interrupt. She was old in her eyes, and young in the way her hand went to her throat when he spoke of promises. "Will I love him?" she asked. "I do not know," Ned said. He wished for once he could say yes and have it be true. "I have heard he is kind." "He is lame," Sansa said, her voice soft as if it would startle the word. "Will that make people laugh at him? And at me?" "Yes," Ned said. "Sometimes people laugh at the wrong things. Willis will have learned when to let them." There was a long silence then. Sansa's eyes had the look they had when she ched candles, as if she were trying to see the shape inside the flame. "He is not a king," she said in a breath that might have been relief or grief. He is not. I can try to be a good lady of Highgarden." "You can try to be Sansa," Ned said, "and let the place fit you, not the other way around." Sansa almost smiled. That never seems to be what they want. Then we will want it, Ned said. Enough people wanting it makes it a rule. Sansa did not argue. She came forward and put her arms around him and her cheek on his chest, and he rested his chin on the crown of her hair and told himself the world was a place you could make with patience. Arya took the news with a snort and a shrug, and then with a question. Does Willis Tyrell like swords? Not as much as he likes dogs, Ned said. Maybe he'd like me better than Sansa then, Arya muttered, and if there was a barb in it, there was also a kind of hope. Sansa can have the dogs. Willis will have Sansa, Ned said gently. If Sansa will have Willis. I never get to choose, Arya said, and the old anger flared and fell. But I choose to keep Needle. They can't take that. No, Ned said, meaning it. They cannot. The betrothal was done in a room where the air smelled of cut herbs and old wax. Willis Tyrell came in a fortnight later in a litter with green silk curtains and stepped down on his good leg with more grace than most men on two. He had a long face and kind eyes and hands that had learned to say what his legs could not. He bowed to Ned as if he meant it and spoke to Sansa without simpering. He spoke of hawks and how to let them choose for themselves, of dogs that could smell a lily root when planted too shallow, of a book he had read about the trident and a poem that had annoyed him for the way it lied about the river's sound. He asked Sansa if she liked to walk in gardens. She said yes. He asked if she liked flowers. She said yes. Then, seeing what he had done, he laughed softly and said, All men ask that. They think it is a secret door into a girl's heart. I should have asked what weeds you like, my lady. I like dandelions, Sansa blurted, surprised by herself. They look like sun caught and made into a flower. Willis smiled and did not make a jest. Then I will never let the gardeners pull them all. When they had gone, Arya said to Ned, He looks as if he listens when people say things. I think he does, Ned said. Then maybe Sansa won't lie anymore, Arya said. She lies in the way girls do when they're trying to be good. I don't know what you mean, Ned said. Yes, you do, Arya said, and ran off before answering anyone else's questions. With the reach clipped to the crown with the gold pin of the betrothal and the white cloak that Loras donned, solemn as a knight made anew by grief, the city shifted its weight. Bread came up the river in barges. Old Town sent casks of oil and a letter full of courtesies and needles. The High Septon would be pleased to see more piety in the court and less witchcraft on the steps of the throne. Stannis ground his teeth at that, and then ground them again when he found how many captains and merchants in the Reach wrote to him as to a stern schoolmaster who might mark their papers and never read their names. Your Grace, Ned said one night when the lamps wore halos from the damp and the quills made black sounds on the parchment. You cannot burn the 7. They are idols, Melisandre said, almost gently. False faces. Ash would be kinder than the confusion they sow. You have burned enough shadows, Ned said, and meant it more ways than one. Do not make ashes where we need stone. Stannis looked up then, and for once his eyes were not only iron. I burned my brother, he said. The confession was not meant to be heard, Ned thought. It simply could not be contained in his throat any more without choking him. I did not hold the knife, but I said the word. I choose law where I can. I chose fire when law would break. If there is a price, it comes to me first. A price paid by others is no mercy, Davos said quietly. And a law that starves the innocent is no law, Melisandre returned. Your gods will not come when the dead wake with blue knives in their hands. Mine will. He is coming already. He is here, in the breath that catches your king at night. Leave my breath alone, Stannis snapped, briefly and almost like a man. Leave the September standing, Ned said, and let his voice be a stone. Leave the statues where they are. Let men kneel where they were taught to kneel. The city has learned a new thing already, to trust its rulers to feed it. Do not teach it at the same time to fear that its soul will be confiscated. Stannis stared at him for a long time. There was no love in his look and no hatred. There was a counting and a weighing. Very well, he said at last. Let the 7 keep their sluggish mercy. But if this red woman saves you when the night comes, You will not stop me from making thanks to her God in fire high enough for the city to see it. If she saves the city, I will carry wood for your pyre, Ned said. We will all carry wood, Davos murmured, eyes on the candle guttering in the draught. Word from the north came slow and heavy as stones rolled down a hill. Moat Caelan in iron hands. Rookeries raided along the stony shore. A raven from Deepwood with a black feather tied in a knot. Seals on the beach, men with salt in their beards, smoke where there had been spruce. A message from Winterfell in Maester Luwin's thin, tidy script. The Greyjoys in revolt. Balon styling himself king, again, as if nothing that had happened in 20 years had happened. Theon's name appeared once in the letter, small as ink. Ned read it twice to see if he had made it. He did not sit. He stood at the window with the letter in his hand and the river below him slow and low. He had sent the boy to Pike because it was the rational thing. A hostage is safe's. Tea in the hands of those whose love is paid for by prophecy and old insult. The boy had been all arrogance dressed like desire. He had wanted to be loved for himself alone without understanding that no one is ever loved for themselves alone. The boy would be a man now in his father's eye and that would kill him. He took the letter to Stannis. We send ships north, Ned said. We send ships everywhere, Stannis said. But we can send them to White Harbor first. Wyman Manderley will do his duty when he is fed and flattered, Davos said. He will sell bread to a starving man, and he will give it away afterwards if the starving man has learned how to flatter him while he eats. I can go. He owes me bread and salt I once brought him when I was hungry. Stannis looked between the two of them and then at the map. Take 20 war galleys, he said to Davos. Take gold and letters. Take my seal. Tell Manderley that if he opens his gates and his vaults, his fish will swim with the crowns. If he does not, I will dry his harbor with new laws until his ships sit in mud. That's very like him, Davos said, to have much coin and many threats and to play them both at once. Take something else, Melisandre murmured. Take a coal. The north is dark. It will need a spark. I will take blankets and rope, Davos answered, unmoved. Ned took Davos aside before he sailed. They stood on the quay among bales of cloth and the stale, sweet smell of old apples going to vinegar. There is a boy, Ned said. A handful of boys by now, if I read Varys's silences. Edric Storm is the one you will be offered. He has Stannis's blood and Robert's careless smile. He is a piece of the king that people can carry in their heads without fear. They will ask for him. They will tell you it is for mercy. It will be for leverage. And what do you want me to do? Davos asked. Whatever keeps him from fire, Ned said. If there is to be a Baratheon with a little of Mummer's gold on him for the Reach to admire, let it be him. But not at the cost of my king's daughter. Davos nodded. Only the line of his mouth moved. I am fond of girls who are not king's daughters, he said. In my experience, they are more likely to have both parents. Bring back men, Ned said, and ships and grain, and a thing to make the North remember that the South is not always a thief. Davos smiled with his eyes. If I could bring back all that and good weather besides, I'd ask for a better hand than mine. I'll settle for one ship's safe return and then see to the second. Bring back yourself, Ned said. I have too few men to say to my king the things he needs to hear without thinking first. Davos touched the brim of an imaginary cap and went down the gangplank into the gullet of the ship as if it were a road he had chosen out of all possible roads and would travel with a straight back whatever stones lay in it. The boats went out on a tide that mocked being helpful by dawdling and then suddenly hurrying like an ill-tempered child. The gulls screamed and the ropes creaked and pulled, and for a moment Ned could taste salt as if it were hope instead of tears. The months that followed were a steady wearing down that would have made a lesser man think it was nothing until it had gnawed through all the way to bone. The law had to be made to touch places it had never thought to, and it had to feel like kindness when it reached. Ned sat with guild masters and told them they could not set the price of bread any way that pleased them. He sat with Septon Barth and told him that the city's hungry mouths were no more pious with ashes on their brows than they had been with wine. He sat with a woman who had given birth alone by the fish market and told her that the city could pay for a wet nurse and a pallet, and that she did not need to steal onions, and that she could come to the Tower of the Hand once a week and tell him if anyone tried to make her return the kindness with a debt she could not pay. He did not think of heroism while he did these things. He thought of ledger lines. Stannis took the councils and made them shorter. He replaced men who had used their seats to warm themselves with men who would sit and take notes and enforce what they had decided on their own cousins. He made enemies. He did not mind. He did not notice, sometimes, when their knives touched his cloak. Melisandre burned more than one with a look that might have been witchcraft or simply the kind of confidence that terrifies cowards. The city tested him. There were whispers of the Red Woman taking a chamber near the sept and burning candles until they seemed to draw the air into their flames. There were signs painted on walls in the Crownland's dialect that called her whore and witch and foreigner. Stannis ordered them scrubbed and then did not forbid the next ones because someone Varys likely had taught him that if you scrub every wall too eager, you simply teach men to write on ceilings. A raven came to the Red Keep with a wax stick with such care that Ned thought, the message matters more than the speed. It was from Winterfell, and it said the words he had feared to see from the day he sent Theon with his carved little pride down to the sea. Winterfell is taken. The boy is wearing your son's clothes. The ravens are shot at the rookery. We flee. Luwin's hand had steadied even while the ink blurred where a tear had fallen. He had added something like a prayer. Bran is alive. Rickon gone. The names bent and rose as if climbing a stair. Ned saw the room as it would have been. The maester's hand on a boy's shoulder, the boy older than a boy should be. A girl's breath held because she has seen her fear's face and learned it is only a face. And then the door opening and men with the sea on them. The letter did not say Osha. It did not say Reek. It did not say Bolton. It did not say the things that would drip out later like water from a thawed wall. He sent for Robb and Fo. Our Catelyn, and then remembered that one of them was too far to hear and the other had never fully left. He wrote anyway. He wrote to Robb and told him that the Ironborn had taken a wolf's haul and that this was a war they had always wanted. A shallow one along the coast that would let them sing about raids while men bled inland. He told him to send men north from the Riverlands by the neck, and to hold the twins with promises he would keep. He wrote to Catelyn and told her he was sorry with such blasphemous care that the words were almost a sin. He wrote to Wyman Manderley and asked him for ships with the voice of the king and the man both. He wrote to Roose Bolton, who had a way of obeying and not obeying at once, and told him that he would hold the Dreadfort under the law if the man who owned it did not hold to the law with the hand that owned him. Stannis came when Ned sent the page with the letter open on the desk, as if the words could call the king like a horn. He read them and did not move his face. How many men does Balon think he commands? He asked of the heir. Enough to take villages near the shore, Ned said. Not enough to hold Winterfell if we call the north to itself. You cannot call the north to itself if you are here, Stannis said. You can only write letters that are read by men who would rather obey themselves. Then make me what I am, Ned said, before he could decide if it was wise. Warden of the North. Let the word go out from the Red Keep and the King's mouth. Let them hear it in the Wolf's Wood and on the barrows and in the halls that have been waiting to like or dislike you. Give me the name and I will give you the North kept. Stannis's gaze moved from Ned's face to the map and then to the candle he had been burning down for 3 nights as if to prove to himself he could outlast it. Done, he said. You go north by sea with the first ships we can spare. You take Manderley's men if he has any worth their salt. You take Royal Writ and my banner. You take. Not the Red Woman, Ned said. Davos, Stannis finished as if nothing had happened. He will keep your ships from sinking and my generosity from drowning itself. Melisandre's mouth made a shape that might have been a smile and might have been the shadow of one. The north is dark, she said, almost lazily. You go without the fire you will find there. So be it. The night remembers names. It has kept yours. I'll remember its name in return, Ned said, and did not bow. He was long past bowing where men did not ask it with their whole lives. Davos returned before Ned could leave the city. His ships heavy with casks. His men light with relief. He brought grain and barrels of fish and letters that had taken 3 men to write and 1 clever man to dictate. Wyman Manderley wrote as if he were singing and eating at once. He offered fealty so florid that a less patient king would have taken offense and picked the honeycomb out to find the sting beneath. Davos translated while Stannis read. "He will open White Harbor to royal ships," Davos said. "He will hold his knights ready to ride wherever the king commands once the snows permit and the roads bear weight. He will bake the king pies and praise them louder than anyone else in the room. He will do nothing for the Freys because he hates them, and he will do everything for your daughters because he loves a story where girls are happy at the end. Tell him to bake and to ride," Stannis said. "Tell him to keep the harbor open and to pay his taxes in fish if he won't in coin. Tell him to send men to Winterfell. Tell him if he fails at any of this, I will write a law with his name in it that makes other men hungrier than he is. Tell him—" He paused, the candlelight making a small golden court at the edge of his mouth. "Tell him he will be first in my grace when the north is quiet. That is a phrase he will like." "He will," Davos said, and did not roll his eyes where Stannis could see it. "He will like it so much he will spend it at least 4 times over before you can say it again." Melisandre watched the exchange as a cat watches a game played with string. Not with contempt, but with the knowledge that when the string ends, her teeth will be there. Davos also brought a boy. He disembarked with it in his eyes and kept those eyes clear even when the boy was brought to the solar and the boy knelt and said, "Your Grace," to Stannis in a voice that would be deeper in 2 years and that had not yet learned to crack. He had freckles across his nose like errant stars and a lower lip that wanted to push out when he concentrated. Stannis kept his face as if it were stone. Melisandre's lips parted, just a little, when she saw him and then closed again. "Edric Storm," Davos said. "I collected him at Storm's End, with the rest of the wind. Ser Courtenay Penrose is—" He swallowed. "Is dead. He fell from the walls. They say a door opened when it ought not. It could only have been opened from within." "Shadows," Melisandre murmured. "Men," Davos said. "I've seen doors opened by greed and by hunger and by fear before. I know their shapes." Stannis did not look at her. He looked at the boy. "You are my brother's bastard," he said. "Yes, your grace," Edric said. "I am." "You will be raised as befits your blood," Stannis said, and the relief on the boy's face was like seeing a bird lifted off the ground by an updraft instead of by a hawk. "You will not be my heir. You will be given a sword instructor and a tutor, and you will not learn to gamble. You will learn to pray." And here he did not look at Melisandre either. "You will serve the realm as men of our blood do. You will do better at remembering the heart of the realm than my brother did," Stannis added in a low tone no one was meant to hear. "You will not do as badly at remembering where your cock is useful and where it is not." Edric said, "Yes, your grace," very earnestly and with no idea at all what he was promising. Ned liked him. Afterwards, in the corridor where the air always smelled faintly of feathers and distance because the rookery's stair ended there, Ned spoke quietly to Davos. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" Davos said. "For having the sense to knock quietly," Ned said, "and to carry the boy like a man, not a flag." Davos blew out a breath that might have been a laugh. "I had 7 sons," he said. "You learn how to carry boys. And one of them is gone because of this city," Ned said. It was not an apology because Davos was not a man who wanted apologies. It was a recognition. "I had them because of this city too," Davos said. "And because of the sea. The sea takes and gives. The city only remembers what it took. I am trying to teach it to count better," Ned said. "To remember both columns." Davos nodded. "You're improving its handwriting. It still errs on the side of greed." The day Ned left for the north was colder than the calendar permitted. The sky was a lid of dull tin. The river hissed at the piling as if it disliked being asked to bear weight. Sansa stood on the quay in a cloak trimmed with lamb's wool and did not cry because she had decided to be the kind of girl who does not cry when men go away. Arya stood with her feet set wide apart and her hair bundled under a cap like a boy's and did not promise anything at all. Renly Baratheon stood beside them with her patched, pretty face and held a book. She had learned that words do not leave you as quickly as promises do. "Do not make the sea a god," Ned told his girls. "It is a road." "What is the road to?" Sansa asked. "Home," Ned said. "Always." Arya squinted at him. "Do you think if you say that word enough times it puts a roof over your head?" "Yes," Ned said. "If you say it and then you go." He touched both their cheeks. "I will write. Keep the guards I set. Do not sneak into the kitchens to steal hot buns." "That was Sansa," Arya said promptly. "It was you," Sansa said equally promptly. "It will be both of you if the buns are worth the scolding," Ned said, and stepped back because it was easier to see clearly when there was a little distance. "Willis will treat you with care," he told Sansa. "Tell him when you don't want to be careful." Sansa looked up at him and something like mischief flickered and was gone. "Only sometimes." "More than sometimes," Ned said. To Arya he said, "Do not put knives where you will need them in a hurry. You always forget where they are when you hide them too cleverly." "I don't," Arya said, offended. "You do," Ned said. "And change your boots when you come in wet. The marble looks dry and the next thing you know you're flat on it." "That happened to Tommen," Arya admitted. "He cried." "Of course he did," Ned said. "He is a boy, and he is Tommen." He bent, awkward with armor, and hugged her hard. "If you want to write me a letter that says more than 3 lines, teach the raven to carry weight." "I will teach it to speak," Arya said. "Then it can tell you its own letter." He kissed the crown of her head as if she were still small enough to be scooped up. He shook hands with Willis, who held his fingers with a man's steadying pressure, and with Loras, who knelt to Stannis that morning and had not moved his face since. He bowed to Shireen as if she were a queen because for a moment he wanted to see her feel it. He endured Melisandre's look. He endured Cersei's. No, he did not. She was high in her tower. He did not look up. He boarded the ship and took his place by the rail and did not look back until the ropes were thrown and the oarsmen took water in their rhythm and the city began to move away. Then he looked because he could, not because he could not stop himself. The voyage north was not the part that made stories, though sailors can make stories of any water that gets under their feet. They skirted shipwrecks that had been hiding for years under the surface and had risen when some whim of tide had curled its finger under them. They put in at Gulltown and bought 2 new ropes and 3 new lies. They slid past the fingers where the cliffs looked as if they had grown up to spite the sea for trying to eat them. They saw whales blowing in the morning like little islands with lungs. They ate badly. They slept badly. They argued about which precursors of a storm meant what, and then when the storm came they all forgot what they had argued and simply did not die. They made White Harbor on a day so bright you could have counted the chips out of the Merlin tops from the quay. Wyman Manderly greeted Ned with the effusive care of a man who has learned to put more syllables on his words when he wishes them to be believed. He wore a robe that looked like he had eaten its price and had the appetite still to eat it again. He fell to his knees at the sight of the king's banner and touched it with fingers that stained everything they touched with sincerity. "Lord Stark," he said, rocking to his feet with a dignity that had to be hauled up like a net full of fish. "Your Grace's hand. The harbor is yours. My daughter would kiss your daughter's brows if they were here. My kitchens are yours. My ships, my poor wit. See, eat. Tell me how to be noble and I shall do it. And if I cannot be noble, I shall be useful, which is near enough." "I will need both," Ned said. "And men who can ride in snow." "My men are better at eating in snow," Wyman said gravely. "But they can learn to ride where they must. There is rumor of krakens. There is rumor of your son. There is rumor of a boy with your face running in the woods with a giant. I know which rumor to feed," he added. "But tell me which to punish." "Feed the one with men in it," Ned said, "and punish the one with fire." He made no bargain this man did not see. He simply laid them all out on the table and counted them like plates. White Harbor sent men upriver in small groups so that the Ironborn would not cut a wide piece from a single fat march. Ned took 200 south to Baratheon and thence east until the land remembered how to be marsh. The neck smelled like old soup, rich and stale at once. He stopped at Greywater and thought of Howland Reed and the old promise he had made to keep quiet about a truth that still woke him choking some nights. Howland came out to meet him with water weeds in his hair, and his eyes bright with something not entirely of this world and not entirely of another. They clasped forearms. They spoke little. They walked the bank and watched a heron step into the air, as if it had remembered it could do so. "The dead walk," Howland said. Sometime after the sun had gone behind a bank of cloud that had not been there a moment earlier. "My reeds tell me, Crannogmen have always kept their feet on tussocks because the ground is treacherous. We did not use to fear men's corpses the way we fear the muds." "I have letters from the wall that do not say that and mean to," Ned said. "The ink is careful. The words are not. The words want to say something else." "Tell your king," Howland said. "But he will listen to his fire if you do not teach him the sound of ice." "I may do both," Ned said. They parted as they had met, like men who had shared a secret in the dark and were not quite ready to let it see the sun. Ned crossed the causeways with the smell of rot and old courage in his nose and the sound of water knowing what it did in his ears. Robb was not at Moat Cailin. He was not anywhere men expected him to be because he had learned to be a wolf in truth, and wolves are where you are not looking. He came to his father's camp at night, the dogs not barking, gray wind a shadow that had decided to have teeth. He came into the lamplight, and for a moment he was the boy who had been stern with a wooden sword and exasperated with his sisters and eager to do a man's work and not yet aware of the weight of it. Then he was the man he had had to be. His mouth a straighter line than Ned had ever hoped to see on his own son's face. His eyes the color of winter water. "Father," he said, and that was all for a long time because sometimes the word itself was a continent and it took time to cross. "You took the Kingslayer," Ned said after a while, as if he were only starting the conversation where it had been left months ago. "I did," Robb said. He tried to make a jest and then he didn't. "He is better at the first. He is less good at wide fields in the dark when men are angry and it is not for show." He rubbed his jaw with one thumb, an old habit that had never been as noticeable until now. "I lost 3 good men and a boy who had only ever wanted to make a barrel. I would like them back." "You cannot have them," Ned said. "But you can make it matter that they are gone." "I try," Robb said. He looked at the map and the candle, and then he looked at his father and let the man he had built ease a little to show the boy under it. "Theon," he said. "Yes," Ned said. How little there was to say when you wanted to say so much. "I did not see the sea in him," Robb said. "I saw only the boy who wanted to be my brother. That is my fault. I made a brother out of a hostage. I wanted it enough to believe wanting could do it. He let them into our home. He made jokes about it. He lived in rooms where you had and thought he had fattened his name on the ashes of yours. He is a boy and a fool and a traitor. I do not know which to kill him for." "Kill him for the law," Ned said. "And forgive him because you were boys together." Robb made a sound that might have been a laugh. "That does not make it easier." "No," Ned said. "But it makes you 2 things at once. That is being a man." "My mother says I am too many things," Robb said wearily. "Your mother is right," Ned said. "And wrong. That is being a mother." They spoke then of Karstark, who had killed 2 Lannister boys in a world where boys had too little to say about whether they lived or died. Robb's jaw set while he spoke and the lamplight did not soften it. He had hanged a man he had needed. He had done it because he believed in something larger than his need. Ned listened and felt the sad pride of a father whose son had learned the lesson you would have spared him and the city both if you could have. They spoke of the phrase and Robb said, "I kept faith." He did not say how heavy the keeping had been, but Ned could see it in the hollows under his eyes. Edmure had married Roslyn. Walder was pleased to be pleased. It let him be vile again without anyone calling him worse for it. A wedding that had smelled of stew and calculation had ended without blood on the rushes. Ned thanked every god north of the wall and south of the neck, old, new, and embers, for that small mercy. They spoke of Bolton, his soft voice and softer hands, the way he made compliments that felt like gloves and might conceal a knife. They spoke of White Harbor, and of Wyman Manderly's willingness to send men who could count to 3 and not lose track at 2. They spoke of the Ironborn, and of Moat Cailin. "We will take it," Robb said. "Not by running at it, by trying every stone until one moves, by starving the rats out, by letting the mud remember it is ours. The neck is ours. The old gods will not keep it for us if we stand around admiring how well they might." "They never did," Ned said. "Men kept what men needed. Word traveled strange in those days. Fast where you wished it would not, slow where you needed it." Theon Greyjoy fled Winterfell with smoke in his hair and a new smell on him he did not yet understand as fear. He fled into the arms of a man who smiled like a small knife. Ramsay Snow, who gave him a new name as if it were a gift and a new skin as if it were a mercy. The ravens came late with that news, and when it came, Ned felt something he had thought beaten out of him by this city he had learned to manage. Disgust so pure it was almost a relief. It gave the world's confusion a shape he could hate. "Justice," he said to Robb when they were alone with only the candle listening. "Not vengeance, though it will be a thin difference." "I will make it," Robb said, and Ned believed him. There are boys born to see a thin thing and put their foot in the right place on it. They took Moat Cailin by the kind of slow work that Southerners write one line about and then skip because they have never had to stand knee-deep in something that wants to be a river and a road and a grave at once. They took it by sending a man with a rope and a knife over a wall that had forgotten it was a wall. They took it by lying still when the mosquitoes spoke their holy books in men's ears and trying not to slap. They took it by loss so small and constant it did not have shape. Then the gate opened, one hinge crying, and the Ironborn learned what the neck does to men who think stone is enough. Winterfell was harder. The stone still remembered the names of men who had warmed it. Smoke had taken the name of the hall and tried to make it its own. Wolves had circled the walls because the walls had called to them with their emptiness. They paced as if they remembered a boy on the battlements. The wind thin and cold and kinder than a mother's words could be. The gods would saw men walk in who did not belong and gagged and bled sap. Osha had taken Bran into it and kept him there as if he were a seed. Hodder had folded himself around the boy as if he could make his size into a house. Mira and Jojen Reed had come like water finding the lowest point. The letter that came from there was Cranaxbarse and twice as full. Bran was gone under the hill with the roots. Rickon was gone. A streak of wild. A boy in 2 or 3 pieces of himself running faster than sense can go. Maester Luwin had died under the heart tree as if to make his life a kind of prayer. Theon no Reek had been taken and made into a kind of truth men did not like to look at. When Ned stood in the ruins of his hall, he touched a beam that had blackened and would never be truly clean again. He put his hand on the roughness with a steadiness that made the men around him stop talking. He closed his eyes and saw his father sitting at that table, the cold good bread, the meat cut in thick slabs, the laughter that had been comfortable as a quilt, the boy who had been himself too serious to laugh and too content not to. He opened his eyes because he did not deserve the luxury of time spent in the past. It is a kind of sweet poison that makes the present look too sour. He said, "We rebuild." And the men around him began to move. The Godswood's pool was black as old iron. He sat with Howland Reed under the heart tree's face, which here was cut by men who had believed faces could hold more meanings than one and had tried to carve one that could look 5 ways at once. They spoke of boys that go into trees and do not come out the same, and of wolves who are boys and boys who are wolves, and of the dead walking. Ned told the tree quietly what he had done and what lay ahead. He told it he had tried to be a hand and had been fingers in a good many pies that had needed fingers. He told it his friend was dead and the city lived. He told it his son was a man and he wished he were not quite yet. When he left the Godswood, he felt steadier, which is to say, he felt more stubborn. He set captains to their companies and builders to their timber. He told Roose Bolton with a straight face that if any under his banner were found to have relieved Winterfell of so much as a nail, they would be nailed to the gate with their own daggers. Roose smiled the way a man smiles when he finds his old shirt and it still fits and put his hands together as if to warm them. The north stirred. Men came out of woods with axes and did not look south. Women in halls sharpened spindles as if they might pierce a man's throat, and then laughed to show they were only jesting, and then stopped laughing when they saw the way the men glanced at the door. The Manderley men rode up the King's Road with songs that sounded like feasts. The Umbers shouted because that was the noise their throats liked to make. The Karstarks rode with their grief like armor. The Freys stayed away, and no one missed them. Ned wrote to Stannis, and the letters went on winter-dragging wings and returned with answers that were iron filings on paper. Stannis commanded, and when he did not, he approved. He sent an order naming Ned Warden of the North with wax thick and the stag's antlers broken and then repaired, a poor omen or a sign of mended law, depending on who read it. He sent Davos back with ships lightened of their grain and heavy with promises. He sent a message to the Tyrells that was a mouthful of politeness with hard seeds in it. Loras would be given the white cloak. Marjorie would be given a palace to be mistress of. Old Town would keep its bells. The Reach would be expected to put its swords where its songs were. He sent a quieter letter that only Ned and Davos saw, and it said, "The Red Woman speaks often of king's blood and of ritual. I will not burn my brother's bastard. Keep him where her eyes are not." It was as close to saying, "I am not the man the worst of your fears would make me," as the man could bring himself to write. Ned kept the paper like a relic and sent Edric out with Davos at night by water to be delivered to Wyman Manderley's kitchen, where a boy could hide among pies and learn how to cut onions. Wyman wrote back 6 days later, the ink blotting where his hand had trembled with speed. "The boy is under my roof and has flour on his nose." In the south, Tywin Lannister watched his son's chains grow a story he did not like. He sent ravens to the Reach and ravens to Dorne and ravens to the Vale, and then, because the birds did not bring back what he liked, he sent gold and men. He tried to cut the river's throat at the Red Fork and found Edmure stubborn as a plug. He tried to the Riverlands what happens when you put a river between a lion and his pride, and found rivermen know what to do with lions that drink too deep. He pulled back to Harrenhal and made the black stones there remember screams. Arya Stark memorized maps there with her feet and learned men's names by the way they asked for soup. She learned to say Vala Morgulis under her breath, and he did not know it. Dorne waited. It had always waited better than other places. The sand has patience because it has to. Oberyn came at last in a cloak the color of dried blood, with a smile that would have made a cloister laugh into its sleeve. He came to King's Landing with 6 men and a woman who had dreamt the names of each of the mountain's bones. He sat in a hall where Stannis wore the crown because the High Septon had consented to put it on him so long as he did not set any fires in the sept while he was at it. He asked in a voice that made music a knife, "Where is my sister's justice?" "In process," Stannis said. "Gregor Clegane is outlawed. Trial when he can be taken. Head when found." "You say head as if it was a piece of furniture that you can move at your leisure," Oberyn said, lazily furious. "You say trial as if it was a game you set up on a table and men play without using their hands." "I say law," Stannis said. "You can call it what you like when you leave the hall. In this hall it is law." "Your law moves at a pace that would not trouble a tortoise," Oberyn said. His gaze went sideways like a knife cutting an onion and found Ned. "You are Stark. I have heard you do not move at all unless pushed. I have also heard you made the city sit up and sop at its bread like a civilized man with gravy for the first time in his life. Which is it?" "I move," Ned said, "when the world will let me." "I will push," Oberyn said, cheerful as malice. "Make the world smaller if you have to. My sister was made smaller by a man who breaks things. I will have the opposite of that." It was Varys who furnished the room with names that night, and the names were logistics, and the logistics were soldiers. Beric Dondarrion's band grew on paper where he could not make it grow in the hedgerows. Men were sent with letters that were also warrants. Some did not return. Some returned and had to be hanged because they had turned warrants into opportunities. Gregor was spotted on the road to God's Eye, and then on a bank near the Blackwater, and then in no place at all because the man was so large that rumor filled his absence with him. Stannis wrote writs that had to rest on many tables before they were acted on because men had learned to fear and admire a Lannister more than a king. Stannis sent a message to Dorne that was almost courtesy. "Your prince will be given a seat." Your prince will be given a hearing. Your prince will not have to drink poor wine. Oberyn drank good wine and smiled with his teeth. I will have the mountain, he said to Ned in the garden where Sansa had once left a posy of dandelions on a bench and thought of the boy with the dog's eyes. You look as if you cannot be made to understand my meaning unless I put my fingers into your skull and pull the meanings up by the root. I will have the man who crushed my sister's children's heads against a wall and made a jest of it. I will have him in a room where the air knows his name so that when he is dead it can forget it. You will have what the law brings you, Ned said. The law does not move that way on its own, Oberyn said. It needs men to kick it or to push it while pretending to be fond of it. Kick it, Stark. Ned did not say that he had been kicking law for months, turning it into something that rubbed less blood out of men's lives when it moved. He did not say that he had a list of work he had not done because each day insisted on giving him new things to do that would turn to blood if he waited. He said, I will try, because that was the promise he could keep and meant more, in the end, than men who shouted yes and hid. The city did not burn. It grew quieter at night. It grew used to seeing white cloaks from the Kingsguard who did not swagger because Barristan had taught them to wear their honor like a shirt, not like a flag. It grew used to a king who did not smile and made the aqueduct run. It grew used to a hand who sat in a small chair in a big hall for 2 hours every afternoon and heard complaints about men who stole cabbage and men who stole time. It grew used to a woman in a tower who did not come down and who made the honey in the tower taste a little bitter, and to a boy in the White Sword Tower who learned to bind his own fingers when he bit them until they bled. It grew used to a girl who ran on the rooftops in boys' boots, and to another who walked in gardens with a lame boy and said words to him that sounded like the beginning of a life that had not yet chosen between happiness and duty. The ravens from the wall came slower and thicker all at once. They were heavy with ink in a way that told Ned that men had been arguing, and then writing down the argument so that absent men could argue with the paper. They spoke of a king beyond the wall who was making his tribes into an army, and of dead things found under snow that did not stay content to be under. They asked for men. They asked for grain. They asked for the king's eye. They did not ask for his red woman. But the way the letters did not say the word fire made it clear to Ned that they were thinking about saying it. He took the letters to Stannis. He took them to Melisandre, who read them with a hunger that was not entirely ungenerous. He took them to Davos, who said, The wall is a dock. It needs ships of a different sort, but it needs them. I will go, Stannis said, and the room shifted when he spoke, like a ship taking a wave correctly and the men on deck all feeling it in their knees. When the West is quiet enough for me to leave without turning my back to Ana. When the North is tied to the crown with more than letters. When the Reach sends its men north instead of songs south. I will go. I will stand on a wall and teach the night my name. Melisandre turned her head, the firelight writing itself in her eyes. And there, at last, you will see the true enemy, and you will not argue with me about which gods are false. I will argue, Stannis said, weary, until the enemy offers me something better than this world. He has yet to do so. Ned said nothing. He thought of Jon. He thought of a boy whose letters came seldom and were careful, as if he had learned somewhere that the world read the letters of boys and enjoyed them too much if they were wet with feeling. He thought of sending a raven with the crown seal and a single line, "Do not die being brave," and did not because he knew the boy would laugh and then set his jaw and do it anyway. In the Riverlands, a party of men with torches rode in the dark with their mouths tight and the horse's breath making steam that moved like ghosts. They carried a paper that said Gregor Clegane was a thief, a murderer, and a man the law no longer covered with its cloak. They carried a second paper that said something else entirely. Dorne would have its justice and the realm would watch. When they found the mountain, he was shitting behind a hedge and did not care who saw him. He rose like a boulder that had remembered it could stand and laughed when they read their paper with the steadiness men summon when they think they are doing something big enough to be an excuse for being afraid. The fight was ugly and not particularly long. Gregor killed 3 men because his arms did not care for paper. He took a spear in the ribs that had been dipped in something that smelled faintly of apples. He broke the spear with his hand and pulled it out and threw it away and laughed again, and then stopped laughing because his chest had something in it that did not want to grow. He rode away and then fell a day later in a ditch and bled. The ditch did not care for the great man's name. It accepted him the way it accepted rain. Oberyn did not smile when he heard it. He did not do anything at all for a long moment. Then he drank as if wine could turn to blood on his tongue and be justice for a moment passing and dear. "You will say it is justice," he said, and there was more weariness in him then than Ned had ever thought to see. "I will say I was robbed. That is the right measure of the difference between law and vengeance." He stood and his shadow moved like a spear. "I will take what I can get. This is not what I asked. But it is a start." When he left the city he did not look back. He did not attend a feast. He did not speak to the High Septon or to Littlefinger or to Mace Tyrell. He left a name on the hall like perfume. Oberyn of Dorne had been here. The air after he left was a little cleaner. The year turned. The river developed a skin in the mornings that cracked like laughter when barges cut it. The markets sold thicker scarves. The bakers grinned because the ovens made better bread when the air was cold. The beggars grinned because the men with hot meat in their hands were kinder when the air was cold. Sansa and Willis walked the Godswood with Myrcella, who had learned to be polite to her life even as it made a joke of her. Arya climbed and fell and learned the difference between the sound of her own bones and a bad cobble. Joffrey learned and did not learn. Sandor Clegane discovered that the boy's temper was winter in miniature. It held until it broke, and then it did not stop until something bled. In the west, Tywin Lannister's hair went grayer in streaks that made him look as if the gods had marked him with lines for each of his miscalculations. He tried one last time to drive a pike into the Riverland's belly and pull the fish out gasping. He found Brynden Tully a harder fish than his men liked to clean. He found blackfish on the road where his scouts swore there had been no one, in the river where his men were sure there were only eels, on the hill where they had given up looking because there was nothing but a man standing there with his arms folded. Tywin sent more men. He received more letters. He ground his teeth until men in his hall learned to fear the sound as they would the unsheathing of a blade. He wrote to the Freys. He wrote to Roose Bolton. The letters' paths crossed in the north like a pair of snakes in frozen grass. Roose's reply was smooth as planed wood. Walder's was spotted with grease. Neither said what Tywin wanted it to say. Roose promised obedience to the crown writ and to the hand's voice. Walder promised nothing except a complaint about the price of oats and a daughter with eyes that were two colors at once. In the north, the rebuilding went on with the inexorable patience of men, who know there is no other way to have a roof over your head. Stones were lifted. Stones were set. Stones were refused because they had been burned and would carry the smell of it forever, and other stones were brought from the edge of the Godswood where moss had meant to claim them. The kitchens began to smell of stews you could live on rather than soups you could only remember. The forges woke and sweated. The rookery began to look down at a courtyard that would not embarrass ravens when they flew over it. The winter town remembered the shapes of its own footprints. Bran went deeper. He learned trees are not kind or cruel. They are old. He learned old things do not need to be one thing. He learned wolves are not kind or cruel. They are hungry and they have rules. He learned boys named their hunger with different names depending on whether it sat in their stomachs or their hearts. He learned the world has a north and it has another north you can only get to by closing your eyes. He wrote once in a hand that barely remembered letters. "Father, I am under the hill. I will come out when I can." He had not a maester to make the letters neat. The raven had to be coaxed into believing paper had food in it somewhere if it pecked enough. The letter came to Ned like a voice heard in a dream and remembered at noon. Ned read it 3 times and went to the Godswood in the rebuilt castle and pressed his hand to the new painted heart and said nothing, because sometimes silence holds the shape of the thing you believe better than sound. The wall sent another raven. It was heavy with the kind of news that has no adjectives of sufficient size. Jeor Mormont wrote, "We have seen the dead. We have lost men in a way that makes you count the living by putting your hand on their faces to feel the heat. We have fallen back. Behold, there is a man among the wildlings who says my name like it is a hut in a storm. We have sent the boy you care about with the half-hand into the snow because men must. Mance is a king who plays a harp that makes snow wish it were water. We do not trust harps. Send men. Send food. Send the memory of summer. Ned took the letter to Stannis. The king's face changed as it does when a man hears a sound that is either thunder or a cart falling down a hill. You begin to move before you know which it is. The west will quiet, Stannis said, as if he could will it. We will go north. Davos said, send me first. Let me put eyes to the sea there and talk to the men who know the ice. A king who sails without finding where the rocks are is a king who writes his name on the water and is surprised when it's gone. Melisandre smiled in a way that made the candle's flame lean towards her. There will be no rocks where the fire has passed, she said. There will be no need of maps where the light goes before you. We will take maps, Stannis said, and men, and food, and wood, and laws. We will take a queen's courtesy to tell the North we are not strangers. We will take the boy who wears the crown the city gave him and keep him in a tower where he cannot bite anyone while we are gone. We will take me, Ned said, before the king could ask. If I go, the North hears you. If I stay, it hears me and wonders why your voice is not mine if you are king. You cannot be in two places, Stannis said, contempt carefully hidden by logic. Choose. I choose both, Ned said. I leave men better than I am to hold the city in the dull ways that matter most. I leave Varys the work he loves to do, which is to hear things he has no right to and use them to make other men trust him less. I leave Littlefinger no purchase. And here he smiled, thin as wire, because I will take him with me. Stannis actually laughed. A short bark. Where will you tie him? He slips like an eel. Eels can be smoked, Ned said. And he said it so dryly that even Melisandre's mouth twitched. He did take Peter Baelish north. He did it with a writ of office that made Littlefinger responsible for the crown's levies in the north and crownlands both, and a chain around his ankle under his hose. Peter made a show of delight and a private show of fear and a privateer's show of opportunism. He walked to the rail with Ned on the morning they sailed and said, If you had told me a year ago I would be going north with you, I would have laughed and then begun to make plans. I cannot decide whether I am delighted or appalled that I did both. Be appalled quietly, Ned said. Be delighted when you find yourself a man before a hearth who has stolen nothing that day and still feels clever. Littlefinger sighed. The north is very far, he said. The people talk slowly. It makes them feel close. They are close to each other, Ned said. That is the difference. Littlefinger smiled. Do you know, Lord Stark, I think I have grown to like you. It has made me worse at my job. I have made a great many men worse at some job, Ned said. It is my best talent. The fleet nosed out into water that had teeth. The sky went the color of old pewter. The gulls changed their voices to the kind they use when they mean to follow a long way and complain the whole time. The oars went in and out of the water like men breathing under a heavy blanket. The red keep dwindled and the city with it. Sansa waved until she thought her hand would fall off. Arya scowled into the wind and then scowled harder because the wind did not mind. Shireen raised a hand and then put it down when the wind tried to take her book. Behind them, a city they had made did not burn. Ahead, a wall they had not made waited. The sea between was a road with no milestones. Only men's stories and the way ropes sound when they stretch. In the night, Ned stood by the rail and thought of men's stories. He thought of a boy with winter in his name and law in his bones and a sword at his hip he did not love. He thought of a city with too many knives in it and a girl who walked above them without cutting herself. He thought of a queen in a tower counting years the way one counts bitter almonds in a cake. He thought of a man with a red woman at his elbow, going north to fight a thing old men would have called a story if their stories had not woken them with cold hands. He thought of a godswood made of paint and plaster and a godswood made of blood and water and roots. He thought of the difference. He thought, law is a root when it is not a rope. He thought, we will see which it is in snow. When dawn came, it came as a smudge rather than a line. The sea did not glitter. It breathed. Davos stood at the prow like a man who had never been wrong about a wind and was not about to start today. Melisandre stood a little back and raised her hands and did not conjure so much as let the air remember it could be warmer where she was. The sails bellied. The ships moved. The men sang, some of them, and the song was not a fine one, but it held their breath together, and that was what song is for when you are honest about it. The coast crept by, rock and sand and occasional optimism. Gulls screamed insults. The casks rolled when they should not have and were tied down with curses. The letters tied in leather in Ned's chest moved as if they were restless. In King's Landing, Sansa put on her cloak and walked to the small godswood. Willis was there with a puppy that had chosen him. The puppy sat on his good boot and looked up as if heaven were a ham. Myrcella came with a basket of oranges, and Arya came with dirty hands, and Shireen came with a line of a song in her mouth. Barristan passed by, walking the world as if he had just learned again that he was not yet done serving it. Loras followed, his white cloak catching at a twig and then letting it go like a man who has learned to set aside a hurt and keep moving. Varys watched and smiled and said nothing. Littlefinger was at sea where he could cause less trouble. The city breathed. The realm did not collapse. The wind blew from the north with a smell in it like old iron and clean snow and something else that men would later say had been fear when it had been only the truth stepping into the room. Ned watched the horizon, which never offers promises and often keeps them. He rested his hands on the rail and thought of his women and his boys and his king and his law. He thought, if we can hold the line where water turns to ice, men will eat in winter and write their names in spring and not be ashamed. He thought, if we fail, the law will be a rope and we will be its knots. He thought these things and then he stopped thinking because land rose up where there had been none and men began to shout the names of places and throw ropes and throw curses and throw themselves into work, which is the only thing that keeps fear from setting the terms of your day. At Eastwatch by the sea, the wall made the world a child again. Men looked up and forgot for a moment the shape of their own hands. The ice was blue and not blue at once. It held light like a secret. It held darkness like a fact. It ran and ran until it ended the sky. Stannis came ashore and did not bend his head. Melisandre came after him and spread her hands and smiled with something like recognition. Davos set his jaw and made sure the ropes were coiled, because duty is the shape you give to fear when you don't have time to respect it. The watch stood with their black cloaks and their faces wind-burned into maps. Jeor Mormont stepped forward, his raven croaking a greeting like an old man with an inappropriate sense of humor. He took Stannis's hand like a man who takes a rope he will use. He looked at Ned and nodded once, and it was as if an old debt had been acknowledged and neither man intended to bring it up again. Your letters were honest, Stannis said to Mormont. My men are not poets, Mormont said. They don't know how to lie without making it obvious where the lie is. Good, Stannis said. Teach me the names of the cold, and I will teach it mine. This is the wind, Mormont said. This is the white. This is the sound the ice makes when something that should not be moving does. That is all you need at the start. Where is the boy? Ned asked, quiet, as if sound could travel up the wall and down the other side and bring him back. Beyond, Mormont said. With Corin. He will do well. Or not. That is the truth of boys with something in them that crackles. Write him a letter, Ned said to himself as much as to anyone. Tell him the city did not burn. Tell him his sisters are stubborn. Tell him that men do not become less afraid when they are older. They become better at making the fear do what they want. I am not his mother, Mormont said. I am his commander. Do both, Ned said. If you can. Many men cannot do one. The wall swallowed them. The talk became simpler. The food became worse. The men became thinner in the right way. Fat burned from their courage and left muscle. The nights held their breath. The days pretended not to. Stannis read maps as if he meant to shame the cold by knowing its routes. Melisandre stared into flames and said names none of the men repeated afterwards because they stuck in the throat. Davos counted everything, especially the men. Ned set up a table and listened and made little decisions until they had weight and then made big ones and tried to make them kind. He wrote letters and sent them south, and sometimes they reached and sometimes they did not. Far to the south, in a city that had learned to sit at table and eat without breaking its dishes, Willis and Sansa took turns listening to one another. Arya learned to run without being caught. Joffrey learned that being a prince and not a king is a lesson you do not have to pass if the test is never given. Cersei wore her life like a very elegant shroud. Barristan Selmy watched and waited for a moment when his sword would matter again in a way that felt clean. The Red Woman's shadow fell long across the ice. The old gods listened and did not move. The new ones listened and moved too much. The law sat under everything like a root and sometimes like a rope, and men tugged on it and saw what it held up. On a night when the stars were brittle and the men's breath froze in their beards like foam, a horn sounded beyond the wall. Men in the yard turned and went still. The horn sounded again and then a third time, and it had not sounded 3 times in living memory. The ice to the north cracked with a sound like the breaking of an oath. Ned looked at Stannis and Stannis looked at Ned, and neither man needed to say anything. They moved. The men moved. The fire moved. The law did not move. It would be carried. It would be shoved. It would be forced across ice by men with stiff hands who muttered oaths under their breath and did not mean the gods as much as they meant one another. The first of the dead came silently. They always do until they do not. Then they scream in the sound of glass. The blades that met them were only partly iron. Some were made of words that men had said to one another when the air was not cold. Some were made of long patience. Some were made of the apologetic smile of a king who does not believe he is loved and refuses to die to earn it. Some were made of a boy who runs with a wolf in a place that is and is not and calls down guidance like an old bird. The dead broke where they found these blades and spilled around them where they found their edges dulled by fatigue. It was not a pretty battle and would make poor songs. It was the kind that keeps little boys from crying when they hear wind in the night and keeps old men from spitting on the hearth when they have to stand. When the dawn came down the ice like cider and the bodies lay under a skin the color of old milk and the breath of the men was loud because they were still alive, Stannis stood with his sword down and looked at the line they had held. "We will not leave," he said. "We will make this our business. Let Tywin do what he will. Let the Reach sing. Let Dorne sulk. Let King's Landing eat bread and make more bread. This is the throat of the realm. We will keep it from being cut." Ned nodded because for once he found he did not need to speak to make the world hear him. He looked north and thought, "This is where law is not a parchment but a wall." He thought of the letter he had sent to Sansa the day before. "I stood on the ice and did not think of falling." He thought of Arya's return letter, smudged and short. "I am teaching the cat to come when I call." He thought of a boy beyond the wall learning to pretend he was a man for a day and perhaps being better at it than all of them because boys sometimes are when they learn too early and do not forget to be boys again afterwards. He thought of Catelyn walking under the rebuilt rafters, counting the nails, and of Robb learning how to make a victory into a winter coat for his men. He thought of Littlefinger trying to smile where his lips were numb. He thought of Varys in a city that was learning to be dull and finding interest in it because it kept him from ever having to be bored. He thought of Oberyn in sand that remembers heat and of Wyman in a hall that smelled of flour. He thought of Edric with a smear of soot on his nose and a pie in his hand and a future that might not require him to choose between being used and being burned. The wind blew. The men set their feet the way men do who intend to stand for a long time. The king did not smile. The hand did not either. They did not need to. The day had already agreed to be what it would be, and they would make it a day that took more than it gave only where there was no other way. When night came, it came with moonlight on the ice and the sound of men snoring in tents and of other men praying to gods that did or did not listen. Ned sat with Davos and ate something that might once have been meat and was now only an idea. He drank something that felt like regret and was told it was ale. "We are making a world," Davos said quietly, "not of our choosing. But we are making it. We are making it usable," Ned said. "That is enough." "It is until it is not," Davos said. "But I have learned not to be greedy about good days." "Your sons taught you that," Ned said. "My wife did," Davos said, and his smile made him look like a poorer man and a richer one at once. "A man will brag the lesson came from pain and the sea. It often comes from a woman telling him where to sit." Ned stood after a while and walked to the edge of the camp, where the knight came up to have a look at the fire. He thought of home. He thought of law. He thought of the color of a wolf's eye when it looks at you and you think it is seeing you for the first time, and it is, and you are new to it and it is new to you, and neither of you knows what will happen next, and for a moment you are both only breath and watching. He stood a long time. The night stood with him. The world did not end. The world did not begin. It did the harder thing, continued,